I'm very interested in this program, and filming is also a great way to boost the company's reputation. Ethan Carter looked around at everyone in the meeting room, finally resting his gaze on Victoria White. I also hope that through filming this program, I can find some inspiration for my new book. Ethan Carter's gaze was unhidden as he looked at Victoria White, making her slightly flustered and worried that others might notice something unusual. However, before long, someone else posed the third question, successfully diverting everyone's attention. Ethan Carter's focused stare at Victoria White caused her some unease, fearing that the people present might sense something out of the ordinary. But before too much time passed, someone threw out the third question, successfully shifting everyone's focus. I want to ask Miss Victoria White a question. You are the host of Starry Weekend and now also hosting Celebrity Showdown. So, is it possible for me to record an episode of Starry Weekend? Victoria White turned toward the voice and found that the person asking was Lucas King. It was the first time she had heard him speak Chinese. His Mandarin had a slightly unusual accent, but for someone of Chinese descent who had grown up in America, it was already quite impressive. This question might need to be answered by General Manager Lane. Victoria White glanced at Lucas King before turning her gaze to Sandra Lane. Before Celebrity Showdown airs, we have many ways to promote it. Inviting guest stars to record Starry Weekend is certainly one of the options, Sandra Lane smiled. While answering Lucas King's question, she also revealed an important piece of news. Currently, the production team is in contact with foreign television networks, and several of them have expressed interest in Celebrity Showdown. If the collaboration is successful, everyone will have the opportunity to promote it alongside these foreign networks. Wow, that's great news! Lucas King exclaimed unconsciously in English upon hearing Sandra Lane's words. Everyone turned to look at him, and he quickly realized he had used the wrong language. He promptly added, I mean, this is fantastic news. I'm really looking forward to working with Mrs. White and collaborating with other networks. Me too, Victoria White responded. When she was in the US, Lucas King had taken great care of her, so she was naturally looking forward to working with him again. If there are no further questions, today's meeting ends here. Next, please proceed to the photo studio. Sandra Lane announced the conclusion of the meeting. Everyone stood up simultaneously, preparing for the promotional photo shoot. After the meeting ended, Ethan Carter was the first to stand and quickly left the conference room. Victoria White lagged behind, moving slowly. She waited until Sandra Lane finished organizing her documents before following her. As soon as they stepped out of the room, Victoria saw Chloe Young waiting for her outside. Victoria, are you okay? The three of them walked toward the elevator together. Sandra Lane looked at Victoria White with concern. I only found out that Ethan Carter is part of Cassel before the meeting started. At that moment, I was a bit worried you might overreact. But Ethan Carter said he had a way to calm you down, and it seems he really managed to do so. Victoria, are you okay? The three of them headed towards the direction of the elevator. Sandra Lane glanced at Victoria White with a hint of concern in her eyes. I only found out before the meeting that Ethan Carter is actually Cassel. At that moment, I was a bit worried you might overreact. But Ethan Carter said he had a way to calm you down. Looking at you now, it seems he really managed to do it. Aunt Lane, please don't bring this up again, or I'll explode with anger. The moment the topic was mentioned, Victoria White's eyebrows furrowed tightly into a sharp crease, and her lips pouted high, completely mismatching her usual cold and elegant demeanor. Ethan Carter is just too cunning. I'm furious but have nowhere to vent. Alright, don't dwell on it anymore. After all, he's still the writer you admire the most. Just forget about his identity as the CEO of a top entertainment company, and it'll be easier for you to get along with him. Seeing Victoria White puffing up her cheeks in frustration, Sandra Lane quickly comforted her. Don't think too much. Let Chloe Young take you for the promotional photo shoot first. The day after tomorrow, you'll be heading to Paris. There's a lot of work waiting for you there. Make sure to rest well these 2 days and don't overwork yourself. Yes, I'll be careful, Victoria White nodded, responding to Sandra Lane's advice. Chapter 17, Promotional Photoshoot. Linares Broadcasting Network prepared 5 studios for the guest stars to take their photos. The 4 teams of 2 guests each from Star Speed Race shared a studio, while MC Victoria White was given a studio of her own. Chloe, how many outfits do I need to shoot in today? Victoria White casually asked as Chloe Young led her to the studio. Miss White, you only need to shoot 1 outfit today, followed by a short promotional video, Chloe Young replied. The 2 entered the studio's dressing and makeup area. Inside were 3 people, styling, makeup, and wardrobe professionals Victoria White was very familiar with. SK is the exclusive clothing sponsor for Star Speed Race, and the outfit for today's shoot has already been prepared, Chloe Young explained as she walked over to the wardrobe specialist and picked up the pre-coordinated outfit to hand to Victoria White. Victoria White took the clothes and headed to the dressing room. After changing, she stepped out and looked at herself in the mirror. The outfit chosen by the wardrobe specialist fit her perfectly. She twirled in front of the large mirror, feeling very satisfied with her look. Miss White, if the outfit is fine, you can proceed to hair and makeup, Chloe Young said, opening the door to the makeup room and signaling that Victoria White could begin. All right, Victoria White nodded and started walking towards the makeup room. Wow, Sister Victoria, you look stunning. Victoria White had only taken 2 steps toward the dressing room when a childish voice echoed from the door of the photo studio. Turning her head, she saw Ethan Carter holding Emily Carter as they entered, followed by an assistant and a nanny. The moment Emily Carter spotted Victoria White, her eyes lit up. Emily Carter. Seeing the 2 of them enter, Victoria White paused, her expression puzzled. President Carter, is the meeting already over? Do you still have something to attend to? I'm here for the advertisement shoot as well. Ethan Carter set Emily Carter down, his hands in his pockets, a faint smile playing on his lips. Mrs. White specifically requested a joint advertisement shoot with me earlier. Or has Mrs. White forgotten? Victoria White felt a pang of frustration after being caught off guard by Ethan Carter. She hadn't anticipated this situation at all. Turning to Chloe Young for help, she hoped her colleague would say something on her behalf, but Chloe simply shrugged, signaling her helplessness. If Miss White remains silent, I'll take it as her agreement, Ethan Carter said, noticing her quietness. Without waiting for her response, he turned to his assistant. Where are the clothes prepared for me? President Carter, the clothes are ready in the wardrobe room. Ethan Carter's assistant led him to the wardrobe room. Emily Carter followed her father for a few steps but suddenly stopped as if remembering something. She turned back and ran to Victoria White, looking up at her with wide eyes. Sister Victoria, are you about to do your makeup? That's right. Victoria White crouched down to meet Emily Carter's gaze. Aren't you going to pick out clothes with your dad? I want to watch Sister Victoria do her makeup. Emily glanced toward the wardrobe room, then back at Victoria White, her doe-like eyes shimmering. Is that okay? Of course, it's okay. Emily Carter's adorableness made it impossible for Victoria White to refuse. She took the little girl's hand and led her into the dressing room. Victoria White sat before the makeup mirror to have her hair and makeup done, while Emily Carter settled onto the sofa behind her, playing with a bunny doll and occasionally glancing up at Victoria White. Before long, Ethan Carter returned, having changed into his outfit. He stepped into the dressing room and took a seat in the chair next to Victoria White. She glanced at him and noticed he was now wearing a sporty outfit. Although the clothes weren't particularly form-fitting, they still highlighted his impeccably toned physique, rivaling that of a professional model. As soon as Ethan Carter sat down, a makeup artist approached to style his hair and apply light makeup. The process for men was much quicker than for women. Once the photographer was ready, Ethan Carter headed to the photo studio first to shoot a solo set of advertisement photos. Emily Carter didn't follow him but instead climbed into the seat he had just vacated, flashing a sweet smile at Victoria White. "Miss White, your makeup and styling are complete." The makeup artist finished applying the final touches to Victoria White's look, checked everything one last time, and then informed her. "Thank you," Victoria White replied with a nod. Victoria White thanked the makeup artist, then extended her hand toward Emily Carter. After waiting for the little girl to hop off the chair, Victoria White took Emily Carter to the photo studio. Ethan Carter's personal photo shoot had already finished, and now it was Victoria White's turn. As a professional model, Victoria White only needed minimal guidance from the photographer to strike the required poses. Ethan Carter stood nearby, holding Emily Carter as they watched. Emily's eyes sparkled as she observed Victoria White posing, barely stopping herself from rushing over. "Mrs. White's personal photos are done. Mr. Carter, now it's time for the two of you to take pictures together," the photographer said while directing his assistant to change the backdrop. "All right," Ethan Carter replied, handing Emily Carter over to the nanny before stepping into the photo shoot area. Still upset about Ethan Carter hiding his identity as an author, Victoria White took 2 steps back as he approached, unwilling to stand too close to him. "You two, one is the host of Star Speed Race, and the other is an observer on the show. Since you'll need to collaborate on the program, I hope your photos can convey some warmth," the photographer said, noticing Victoria White's reluctance. Raising his hands, he gestured for the two to move closer together. "Can't we take separate photos and just merge them later?" Victoria White suggested quickly, glancing at Ethan Carter's smiling face. She couldn't shake the feeling that he had ulterior motives. "Both of you are already in the same studio, why take separate photos?" The photographer, who had worked with Victoria White many times, was surprised by her unusual request. "Mrs. White, with your level of professionalism, surely you wouldn't do something so unprofessional?" Victoria White had always been committed to her craft. This was indeed the first time she had made such a request, and the photographer's comment left her momentarily speechless. She couldn't admit that her annoyance with Ethan Carter was the reason she didn't want to take joint photos, that would seem petty. "Mrs. White, wasn't this joint photo shoot your specific request? You're not planning to back out now, are you?" Ethan Carter leaned in closer, taking 2 steps toward her. Lowering his voice, he whispered in her ear, "I have other things to attend to later. If you can wrap this up quickly, I'd be happy to share more details about my new book with you, like its title, for instance." The opportunity to learn more about Cassel's new book just by taking a few photos with Ethan Carter seemed like a bargain to Victoria White. Without hesitation, she nodded. "Deal. Excellent. Now, please move a bit closer. Mrs. White, you can place your hand on Mr. Carter's shoulder." The photographer, relieved that Victoria White finally agreed, immediately began directing their poses, fearing she might change her mind. Hand on the shoulder, standing front to back to back. Under the photographer's guidance, Victoria White and Ethan Carter took more than 10 photos together. They even filmed a 30-second promotional video. Despite it being their first collaboration, the two worked surprisingly well together and quickly completed the task. That's a wrap. Today's shoot is done. Thank you both for your hard work, the photographer said after capturing the final shot. Giving Ethan Carter a thumbs up, he added, "Mr. Carter, I didn't expect you to have such a natural presence in front of the camera. Have you ever considered becoming a model?" Victoria White glanced at Ethan Carter's striking height and sharp features, recalling his professional demeanor during the shoot. Suddenly, she found herself agreeing with the photographer, if Ethan Carter ever became a model, his looks alone could easily captivate a large group of admirers. Victoria White glanced at Ethan Carter, noticing his towering height and sharply defined features. Recalling his professional demeanor during the photo shoot earlier, she suddenly felt that the photographer had a keen eye, someone with Ethan Carter's physical attributes could easily captivate a large audience if he became a model. Thank you for the compliment, but my work keeps me quite busy. I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to take on a modeling role, Ethan Carter responded lightly with a small smile, not adding anything further to the conversation. Mrs. White, come on, time to remove your makeup and change clothes. Chloe Young called out from the dressing room doorway, addressing Victoria White. Coming. Victoria White replied as she headed toward the dressing room. Just at that moment, Emily Carter broke free from the nanny's arms and ran to block Victoria White's path. Miss Victoria, can we go have a meal together? Emily Carter looked up at Victoria White with a sweet expression. Daddy will come too. Well. Victoria White hesitated, glancing between Emily Carter and Ethan Carter. She was about to decline, but seeing Emily Carter's adorable little face, she found herself unable to say no. Is anyone here? Suddenly, 2 knocks sounded on the door of the photography room before it swung open. Sophia Collins stepped inside. Sonny, are you done with your photo shoot? Ethan Carter asked, slightly surprised to see Sophia Collins appear. Mr. Carter, Miss White, I apologize for the interruption. My father just called and mentioned that he'd like to invite you, Mr. Carter, to dinner at our home tonight. Since your phone was unreachable, he asked me to deliver the invitation directly, Sophia Collins explained, holding her phone. She cast a brief glance at Victoria White, her expression showing a hint of hesitation, but she finished her message nonetheless. I was busy taking photos, so I didn't hear the phone ring and missed it, Ethan Carter explained, then glanced at Emily Carter, who was standing in front of Victoria White with a slightly hesitant expression. Does Director Collins have something important to discuss? My father didn't say, but he rarely arranges urgent meetings like this. I assume it must be something significant, Sophia Collins replied, though her eyes remained fixed on Victoria White's expression. When she noticed Victoria White's face darken, her own expression became complicated. All right, I'll definitely come, Ethan Carter agreed after thinking for a moment, accepting the invitation from Sophia Collins' father. Great, I'll call my father now. Let's head over together shortly, Sophia Collins nodded at Ethan Carter and then turned to leave. Emily Carter, we're going to Aunt Sunny's house for dinner tonight. Can you reschedule with Mrs. White for another time? Ethan Carter crouched down, looking at Emily Carter as he spoke. No, I don't want to go to Aunt Sunny's house for dinner. Emily Carter shook her head, refusing to follow Ethan Carter's arrangements. Victoria White could now confirm that Emily Carter held a deep affection for her. Despite Sophia Collins being a few years younger than her, Emily called Sophia aunt while addressing her as sister. This realization made Victoria White chuckle. Mrs. White. Ethan Carter also noticed this. He looked up at Victoria White with a pleading expression. Emily Carter, Sister Victoria has some work to do tonight. Can you be a good girl and go with your dad? Although Sophia Collins' presence had considerably worsened Victoria White's mood, she refrained from showing it in front of Emily Carter and gently persuaded her, siding with Ethan Carter. Then next time, we have to eat 2 meals together. Emily Carter raised 2 fingers to indicate the number 2 to Victoria White. When she saw Victoria White nod, the little girl finally agreed to go with Ethan Carter to the Collins family dinner. Chapter 18, Angel Descends. After the photo shoot for the program Star Blitz was completed, the show officially entered the filming phase. The first filming schedule was set for Thursday following the photo shoot. The host for the domestic competition segment was not Victoria White. She still had to take on the task of shooting advertisements. To film an advertisement for the Paris Caddy Hotel, Victoria White departed for Paris 3 days ahead of the program team. Chloe Young accompanied her as an assistant. After Chloe Young completed the ticketing procedures and checked in both their luggage, Victoria White passed through the VIP gate to enter the lounge. On the way to the lounge, advertisements for digital products featuring Sophia Collins as the model could be seen everywhere. For someone who had debuted not long ago, the resources and opportunities she enjoyed were unmatched by other newcomers. Undoubtedly, this was largely thanks to the support of Sophia Collins' father and Ethan Carter. The moment Victoria White thought about Sophia Collins, the little goodwill she had for Ethan Carter seemed to be dragged back to zero by her growing distaste. Victoria sis. Lost in her thoughts as she walked, Victoria White and Chloe Young had just reached the VIP lounge entrance when a petite figure in a white fur coat ran toward her, grabbing the hem of her coat. Emily Carter. Victoria White was startled. She looked down to meet Emily Carter's sparkling, smiling eyes. Slightly curling her lips, she was a bit surprised. "Why are you here?" "Dad brought me." Emily Carter let go of the coat and pulled Victoria White into the VIP lounge. "Everyone's waiting for you." "My dad's here too." Victoria White hadn't finished her sentence before Emily Carter pulled her to a table near the entrance. Two people were seated there. Victoria White greeted the person closest to her first. "Hello, Director Carter." "Hello, Miss White." Ethan Carter stood up and gestured for Victoria White to sit. "Please, have a seat." Victoria White handed Emily Carter back to Ethan Carter, then sat down across from him. "Get Miss White a vanilla latte," Ethan Carter instructed his assistant, who nodded and headed toward the coffee bar. After the assistant left, Victoria White shifted her gaze to Andrew Fields, seated diagonally across from her. "Director Fields, I didn't expect to see you here." "Mrs. White, we meet again." Andrew Fields nodded at Victoria White before opening his briefcase and pulling out a stack of documents. "I brought the advertising script for this project. Please have a look. I received the digital version the other day and reviewed it several times yesterday." "There was no need for you to bring it personally, Director Fields. The incident on the rooftop of the Caddy Hotel a few days ago was still fresh in Victoria White's mind. Meeting Andrew Fields again made her feel slightly uneasy. She handed the script to Chloe Young, standing beside her, with no intention of reading it herself. "Mrs. White, you're too polite. As the brand ambassador for our hotel, and since Paris is a place I lived for several years, it's only right for me to fulfill my responsibilities and personally escort you to Paris," Andrew Fields responded with a professional smile, unbothered by Victoria White's attitude. "All right then, if Director Fields insists on taking me to Paris, I have no reason to refuse," Victoria White replied, though she had no intention of engaging further with Andrew Fields. She turned her attention to Ethan Carter. "General Manager Carter, are you also going to Paris?" "Yes, Emily Carter's kindergarten is on Christmas break. I take her to France every year for Christmas, and this year is no exception," Ethan Carter said, holding Emily Carter close on his lap. "I didn't expect to see you here, Mrs. White. It seems we'll be on the same flight." "What a coincidence." "Just a coincidence." Victoria White found Ethan Carter's words hard to believe. With how frequently he had appeared around her recently, this chance encounter was likely orchestrated. "Actually, the flight was arranged by our hotel," Andrew Fields interjected upon noticing Victoria White's skepticism. "Mr. Cassel is fluent in French, so the Caddy Paris Hotel invited him to write the advertisement copy and specifically arranged for you both to be on the same flight. Mrs. White, here's your coffee." At that moment, Ethan Carter's assistant returned with the coffee and placed it on the table in front of Victoria White. She softly thanked him, stirred the coffee lightly, and took a slow sip. "Attention, passengers on the flight from Linares City to Paris, France. Boarding will now begin at Gate 22. Shortly after, the airport's announcement signaled boarding time." Victoria White stood up first, leading Chloe Young out of the lounge. Ethan Carter, carrying Emily Carter, followed behind with Andrew Fields, and the group headed toward the boarding gate together. Upon reaching the gate, Ethan Carter, holding a first-class ticket and accompanied by a small child, was given priority to complete the boarding process and entered the first-class cabin. Victoria White followed closely behind. Emily Carter kept glancing over Ethan Carter's shoulder. When she saw Victoria White only a few steps away, the little girl raised her tiny hand and waved excitedly. "Emily Carter, what do you want?" Victoria White quickly stepped forward, taking Emily Carter's small hand as she asked. "Miss Victoria, can I sit with you later?" Emily Carter asked sweetly. "We can watch a movie together." "Emily Carter, don't bother others so casually," Ethan Carter interrupted. "Once I board the plane, I'll need to start working on my manuscript. Mrs. White probably has her own matters to attend to. You need to behave." "Actually, I don't have much to do. If Emily Carter wants to watch a movie, I'd be happy to join her," Victoria White said, noticing the little girl's pout after Ethan's words. She couldn't bear to see her upset and comforted her with a few kind words. After feeding Emily Carter lunch and putting her to sleep, Ethan Carter pulled out his laptop and opened a Word document to begin working on his manuscript. Victoria White pretended to read a magazine, but her eyes kept darting towards Ethan, curious about what he was writing. "Mrs. White." Ethan suddenly turned his head, catching her in the act after who knows how many stolen glances at his laptop screen. Their eyes met, and he asked, "Are you that curious about what I'm writing?" "Not at all." Caught red-handed, Victoria's ears turned red. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her gaze shifting awkwardly. "I was just a little curious. Are you working on a new book?" "Why don't you guess?" Ethan asked, his smile faint but teasing. "I guess you're writing a new book," Victoria replied earnestly, leaning closer. "I remember you once mentioned to Director Lane that Cassel would be working on a new project. Plus, during the last photo shoot, you said you might reveal the title to me." "You remember Cassel's matters quite well," Ethan remarked, feeling a twinge of discomfort. The way Victoria placed such importance on Cassel made him slightly jealous. His tone carried a subtle hint of bitterness. "You still haven't told me, what's the title of the new book?" Victoria, oblivious to the shift in his tone, craned her neck in an attempt to catch a glimpse of his screen but failed. Growing impatient, she pressed him for an answer. "Do you really want to know?" Ethan asked seriously. "Of course." Victoria's eyes locked with Ethan's intense gaze. His deep brown eyes resembled an endless ocean, vast, profound, and tinged with a faint gentleness that instantly captivated her heart. "The book is titled Heaven's Angel," Ethan said softly, but to Victoria, his words carried a deeper meaning. "I want to dedicate this book to a girl I've only recently met. I believe she's like an angel who has transformed my life, making it completely different from now on." Ethan Carter's words left Victoria White stunned for quite a while. A girl he hasn't known for long? Isn't he talking about Sophia Collins? A married man openly flirting with an unmarried woman like this? Victoria White couldn't help but question Ethan Carter's character. "President Carter, what you're doing doesn't seem very appropriate." Victoria White quickly glanced at the ring on Ethan Carter's left ring finger. She didn't say it outright, but if Ethan Carter was smart enough, he would understand what Victoria White was implying. Just as Ethan Carter was about to say something, Emily Carter, who had been lying on her side, suddenly woke up. The little girl groggily reached her hands out toward Ethan Carter. He helped her unbuckle her seatbelt, then held her in his arms, gently comforting her. Chapter 19, The Beauty of Paris. Emily Carter suddenly woke up, interrupting the conversation between Victoria White and Ethan Carter. Throughout the journey that followed, Ethan Carter focused on drafting his manuscript, while Emily Carter stayed close to Victoria White. The two watched movies together, but since Emily Carter's English wasn't very good, she had to rely on Victoria White to translate for her. Ethan Carter explained that at home, they usually spoke either Chinese or French and hadn't intentionally trained Emily Carter in English. 10 hours passed quickly. After the plane landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, just like when they arrived, the three were prioritized to disembark and complete immigration procedures first. When Andrew Fields and Chloe Young exited from the economy passenger gate, the 7-seater car from the Caddy Paris Hotel was already waiting. The driver helped load their luggage into the trunk, and the vehicle began heading toward the city center. Hello everyone, I am Girac, the manager of the Caddy Paris Hotel. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to stay at our hotel. A short, stocky middle-aged man with Mediterranean-style blonde hair, dressed in a neat three-piece suit, stood waiting at the entrance. Upon seeing Victoria White and the others enter the hotel, he greeted them in English and then invited them into the VIP lounge. Mrs. White, first of all, congratulations on becoming the global ambassador for our Caddy Hotel. It is an honor that the first commercial shoot is being held at our hotel. To ensure you experience the best of our services, I've arranged for you to stay in a luxury suite. Manager Girac approached Victoria White respectfully, presenting her with a room key card. You are welcome to use all the hotel's services at your convenience. I assure you that our entire staff will be dedicated to serving you. Thank you very much, Victoria White replied, accepting the room key card. She noticed that Girac had arranged a luxury suite for her, a room category positioned between the presidential suite and a standard room. It seemed the requests she had made to Andrew Fields earlier had been effective. Although it didn't entirely meet Victoria White's expectations, she was still quite satisfied. In addition, we have arranged a luxury suite for Mr. Carter and his daughter, as well as Director Fields. Director Girac then handed Ethan Carter and Andrew Fields each a room key card. If you have any feedback or concerns, please feel free to let our staff know. I have a question. Emily Carter first spoke in English, then switched to French while addressing Director Girac. The director nodded repeatedly, saying, "Oui," several times. Although Victoria White didn't understand what they were discussing, she could sense Emily Carter's fluency in French, which indicated that Ethan Carter must have taught his daughter extensively. It seemed he had put in significant effort into her French education. Mr. Carter has some matters to attend to. Mrs. White and Director Fields, please proceed upstairs first. One of our staff members will accompany you. After exchanging a few sentences in French with Emily Carter, Director Girac switched back to English. He directed the bellhop to assist with the luggage and then led Ethan Carter and his daughter to the reception desk. The bellhop pushed the luggage cart to the door of room 1407. After Victoria White swiped the key card to open the door, the bellhop placed the luggage in the suite's foyer. Victoria gestured for Chloe Young to tip the bellhop as a token of appreciation for his assistance. Mrs. White, are you tired? Would you like to rest for a while? Chloe Young, having finished organizing the luggage, stepped out of the dressing room and asked Victoria White, who was surveying the master bedroom. I'm not tired. I can rest later tonight. Victoria White glanced at the large European-style bed in the center of the bedroom, its 4 intricately carved golden posts adding a touch of elegance. The bed was adorned with pristine white silk linens, their subtle patterns enhancing the luxurious ambience. Victoria White approached the bedside table, casually picked up a glass of champagne, and walked over to the window. She drew back the curtains and stood before the large glass pane, sipping the champagne as she admired the view. Paris truly lives up to its reputation as the city of romance. It would have been wonderful to visit back then. Gazing at the timeless and romantic Parisian scenery, Victoria White mused aloud, "Chloe, if the weather is nice tomorrow, let's go out and explore." Of course. Chloe Young stepped closer, standing beside Victoria White. Tilting her head slightly, she asked, "Miss White, when you said, back then, were you referring to your childhood?" "No, it was during the time I graduated from university." Victoria White took another sip of champagne, her thoughts drifting to the past. Originally, Vivian Moore and I had planned to backpack through Europe after graduation. But she suddenly came to the US to find me and insisted on not going to Europe. In the end, I gave in to her and we went on a road trip through California instead. So that's how it is. Actually, it's no big deal. This time, you can still explore Paris, Chloe Young comforted Victoria White. True, there's still some time before the commercial shoot. We can take a walk around the famous landmarks in Paris. While Victoria White and Chloe Young were chatting, someone suddenly rang the doorbell. Chloe Young walked to the door, looked through the peephole to see who it was, and then turned back to Victoria White. Mrs. White, General Manager Carter is outside holding Emily Carter and ringing the doorbell. Should I open it? Go ahead. Victoria White guessed they must have something important to discuss if they came knocking. Sis Victoria, we're here. As Chloe Young opened the door, Ethan Carter put Emily Carter down. Emily Carter cheerfully ran into the room and over to Victoria White. Emily Carter, how did you know I was in this room? Victoria White squatted down, smiling warmly at Emily Carter as she gently asked. I told the manager to arrange our room next to yours. The manager agreed, so Dad and I came upstairs. As soon as we put our luggage down, we came to find you. So that's why you had a private conversation with the manager. Victoria White immediately figured it out, it must have been the request Emily Carter made in French when they were checking in. She chuckled, lightly pinched Emily Carter's small hand, and pointed at the welcome cake on the bedside table. I have this cake here. Would you like some, Emily Carter? Papa. Emily Carter didn't answer Victoria White directly but instead turned to look at Ethan Carter, who was standing at the bedroom door with his hands in his pockets. Mrs. White, I've already called for room service. Someone will bring food to your room shortly, Ethan Carter said. Director Jurek originally planned for us to dine at the hotel restaurant, but I figured everyone must be tired from the long flight, so I took the liberty of ordering food instead. General Manager Carter is truly thoughtful, Victoria White remarked casually, not genuinely expecting Ethan Carter to order dishes she liked. But when the staff delivered the food to her room, Victoria White was surprised to find that Ethan Carter had ordered all Sichuan and Hunan dishes. What amazed her even more was that, in a foreign land, she could enjoy such classic Sichuan and Hunan cuisine, making her appetite grow even stronger. However, when the room service waiter brought the food to the suite, Victoria White realized that all the dishes Ethan Carter had ordered were classic Sichuan cuisine. What surprised her even more was that, in a foreign land, they could still enjoy such authentic and iconic Sichuan dishes. This made Victoria White unable to resist her craving, her mouth watering at the sight. Although the main course was entirely Chinese cuisine, the serving order followed a French style, and dessert after the meal was a classic French treat. Emily Carter, tomorrow at 8 a.m., I have a video meeting with the company director back home. You can sleep in, and then I'll take you to breakfast later, okay? Ethan Carter scooped a small spoonful of tiramisu and fed it to Emily Carter while casually making this suggestion. But I don't want to have breakfast at the hotel restaurant. I want to go to that pastry shop we visited last time. Emily Carter swallowed the cake and clung to Ethan Carter's hand, pouting. I want to eat those super delicious macarons. But that shop is a bit far from the hotel, and it's always crowded. If we wait until after my meeting, the macarons might be sold out. Ethan Carter couldn't resist Emily Carter's pleading, but her request genuinely left him in a dilemma. He turned to Victoria White for help, signaling her to persuade Emily Carter. Miss Victoria, let's go out for breakfast. To Emily Carter, Ethan Carter's gesture seemed to mean he was inviting Victoria White to join them. The little girl eagerly turned to Victoria White and said, that pastry shop is amazing, and the macarons are so delicious. Mrs. White. Ethan Carter gave Victoria White a look, signaling her not to agree. Macarons are sweet treats, they're pretty nice as snacks. Ignoring Ethan Carter's subtle hints, Victoria White tilted her head thoughtfully and then said to Emily Carter, I was planning to go out for a stroll tomorrow. If you want to go out, I can take you along, but you'll need your dad's permission first. Hearing Victoria White's response, Ethan Carter immediately looked a bit dejected. His gloomy expression amused Victoria White, who pressed her lips together to stifle a laugh. not wanting him to notice her amusement. "Dad, please let me go out with Miss Victoria. I promise I'll behave." Victoria White's agreement felt like a golden ticket to Emily Carter. She clung to Ethan Carter's hand, shaking it vigorously as she begged for his approval. "I really can't say no to you." All right, you can go with Mrs. White." Ethan Carter finally relented under Emily Carter's persistence. "But you have to listen to her and make sure you don't wander off. Got it?" Got it. Emily Carter happily raised her little hand and responded loudly. Chapter 20, Encountering the Unexpected. Victoria White enjoyed a restful sleep on the soft king-size bed throughout the night. At exactly 6 a.m., she woke up and exercised in the gym of her suite. After an hour of working out, she took a shower, changed her clothes, and got ready to go out. Just then, the doorbell rang. Chloe Young opened the door and led the guest into the living room. Victoria White stepped out of her bedroom and saw that the visitors were Ethan Carter and Emily Carter. "Good morning, Mrs. White." Ethan Carter greeted her as she approached. "Good morning, Sister Victoria." Emily Carter, dressed in a pristine white fur coat, bounced on the sofa like a small, lively pearl. "Good morning to both of you," Victoria White replied as she sat down on the sofa. Emily Carter positioned herself between Victoria and Ethan Carter. "Sister Victoria, your face is all red." Emily Carter noticed Victoria's flushed cheeks from her workout and gently touched her face. "You look so beautiful." "Thank you, and you're adorable too," Victoria White said, lightly pinching Emily's tiny nose, showing no discomfort at the girl's affectionate gesture. "Emily Carter, that's not appropriate," Ethan Carter interjected, his tone slightly disapproving. "Do you remember what I told you? When visiting someone else's home, you need to follow proper manners and not touch things or people without permission." "Yes, Dad," Emily Carter replied, smiling apologetically at Victoria White before obediently sitting down between her father and Victoria, looking utterly charming. "That's better," Ethan Carter praised his daughter before handing an envelope to Victoria White. "Mrs. White, I have a meeting to attend shortly. Could you please look after Emily for a while? I've included some suggestions in this envelope that you might find helpful." "Of course," Victoria White agreed as she took the envelope. Upon opening it, she found a card inside. The card displayed, in both English and French, the address of Emily Carter's favorite bakery and a café that served breakfast. Ethan Carter had noted beneath the addresses that the café was the best in Paris. Judging by the locations, the two places seemed close enough to walk to. Additionally, the envelope contained a €500 bill, which surprised Victoria White. "Mr. Carter, what is this money for?" she asked. "Emily has quite the appetite and doesn't have a sense of money. She tends to buy things without considering their price. I estimated that €500 should be sufficient for her to spend in a day. This money is for her to use," Ethan Carter explained while gently patting Emily's head. He added with some concern, "Also, Paris isn't the safest city. I'll have my assistant accompany you too when you go out to ensure your safety. If the money is for Emily Carter, I'll just take it first, and we can settle any discrepancies later." Victoria White placed the card back into the envelope and handed it to Chloe Young, instructing her to put it in her handbag. "But there's no need for an assistant. My assistant will accompany me, and we won't be outside for too long. After breakfast, I need to visit the flagship store of SK Paris to select outfits for the advertisement shoot. There shouldn't be any security issues. All right, if anything comes up, just contact me." "That works. If there's any problem, feel free to reach out anytime." After finalizing arrangements with Ethan Carter, Emily Carter was officially entrusted to Victoria White. By no later than 8 o'clock, Victoria White had reorganized her handbag. Once she ensured everything necessary was packed, she, along with Chloe Young, led Emily Carter out of the main entrance of the Caddy Hotel. The hotel had arranged a limousine with a private driver to escort them. Driver, we'd like to go to this address. Victoria White handed the card prepared by Ethan Carter to the driver and spoke in English. What's the French name of this place? The driver asked in halting English. This. Victoria White glanced at the name of the store and tried pronouncing it in English, but it was clear the driver didn't understand. I know. Emily Carter promptly stepped in to help, fluently telling the driver the store's name in French. Thanks to Emily Carter's directions, the driver quickly located the bakery she liked. Since the area was a pedestrian-only zone, the driver stopped at the corner of the street, watching as Victoria White and Chloe Young led Emily Carter toward the bakery. At Emily Carter's request, Victoria White bought every flavor of macaron available in the shop, filling an entire box. Hugging the box of her favorite macarons, Emily Carter contentedly followed Victoria White and Chloe Young to the cafe recommended by Ethan Carter. The moment they stepped into the cafe, the rich aroma of coffee wafted through the air. Inside, the place was bustling with customers, with small groups enjoying their breakfast. Bonjour. A staff member behind the counter greeted them warmly as they entered. Victoria, let's sit outside. After placing their order, Chloe Young stayed at the counter to wait for the food, while Emily Carter pointed to a small round table outside. Victoria White carried Emily Carter out, where there happened to be 3 chairs around the table. She seated Emily Carter in the innermost chair and took the one next to her. The warm winter sunlight filtered through the gaps in the awning, casting a gentle glow on the table and enveloping them in a cozy ambience. There's a bookstore next to this cafe, Emily Carter. How about we stop by after breakfast? Victoria White glanced around and noticed a charming little bookstore nearby. She pointed toward it and said to Emily Carter, maybe we'll find one of your dad's French books there. Sister Victoria, I want to ask you something. Emily Carter rested her chin on her hands, her big eyes blinking as she looked at Victoria White. Do you like my dad more, or do you like my dad's books more? Why are you suddenly asking that? Victoria White was momentarily startled by Emily Carter's question. Dad said you agreed to work with him because you liked his books. Emily Carter pouted, looking a bit unhappy. But I think my dad is way better than his books. Sister Victoria, you should like my dad more, right? Emily Carter, there are some things you don't understand yet, and I can't explain them all at once. You'll understand when you're older. Victoria White reached out to pat Emily Carter's head, mumbling to herself, besides, not all feelings lead to results. Apart from her close relationship with Sophia Collins and the hidden truths she had once concealed, the more Victoria White interacted with Ethan Carter, the more she realized how different he was from what she had imagined. Her admiration for him grew day by day. But no matter what, he was already a man with a wife and a daughter. Victoria White constantly reminded herself not to get too caught up. Miss, excuse me for a moment. Just as Victoria White was lost in her thoughts, an unfamiliar male voice suddenly spoke beside her. Startled, she turned to see a young man with tan skin and a buzz cut standing next to her. He asked in broken English, "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" "Yes, someone's sitting here." Realizing he wanted to share her table, Victoria White glanced toward the cafe entrance. Chloe Young was carrying the bread and drinks she had just ordered and was heading back. Victoria quickly responded and instinctively placed her handbag, which had been on her lap, onto the chair to hold the spot, a habit she had picked up back home. "All right, thanks for letting me know." Seeing Victoria White use her bag to reserve the seat, a strange glint flashed in the man's eyes. Pretending to look for another table, he turned away but, in a split second, spun back around and snatched Victoria White's handbag before bolting. Victoria froze for a moment, then immediately shouted, "Someone stole my bag." As soon as her words left her mouth, Chloe Young had already pushed open the door and dashed out, shouting, "I'll catch him." She took off like a whirlwind, her movements swift as lightning, leaving Victoria White stunned with her mouth agape. How could Chloe Young be so agile? Chapter 21, Safe and Sound. The sudden robbery drew the attention of everyone in the cafe. One staff member hurriedly cleaned up the bread and drinks Chloe Young had thrown to the ground, while another quickly rushed over to check on Victoria White and Emily Carter. "Miss, are you all right?" "We're fine, but my bag." Victoria White glanced at Emily Carter, who was still seated calmly and unharmed. Victoria then turned toward the direction where the thief and Chloe Young had disappeared, her face filled with worry. "My passport, phone, cash, and credit cards are all in that bag." "Ma'am, would you like to call the police?" the staff member asked while pulling out their phone. "You can use my phone to report it." "Thank you, but there's no need for now. My assistant hasn't returned yet, maybe she can retrieve my bag for me." Victoria White kept her eyes fixed on the direction Chloe Young had gone, silently praying that her assistant would bring her bag back. "Understood." Seeing that Victoria White didn't intend to report the incident immediately, the staff kindly reminded her, "If you need to call the police or contact someone, you can use my phone anytime." Victoria White's emergency contacts were Sandra Lane and Vivian Moore, but they were both back in her home country, thousands of miles away. Even if she contacted them, they wouldn't be able to help. So, who else could she turn to? Just as Victoria White was racking her brain, Emily Carter suddenly extended her left hand toward her. "Miss Victoria, could you help me roll up my sleeve?" "Emily, are you feeling hot?" Victoria White asked as she bent down to adjust Emily's sleeve. To her surprise, as the sleeve was rolled up, a small pink watch appeared on Emily's delicate wrist. Next to the watch was a conspicuous red button, making it clear that this wasn't an ordinary watch. "No, I just need some help," Emily replied while pressing the red button. The watch immediately switched into call mode, functioning like a phone. After a few short beeps, the call was answered. "Emily, what's going on?" "Daddy, Miss Victoria and I are at the cafe you like. Her bag just got snatched." Emily spoke directly into the watch, addressing Ethan Carter on the other end. "Come help us, please. Are you both all right?" Ethan Carter's voice instantly became tense upon hearing Emily's words. "We're fine." "Good. Stay right where you are and don't move. Emily, activate your location tracker." "I'll be there immediately," Ethan Carter instructed before quickly hanging up. Emily did as she was told, pressing the green button on her watch to activate her location tracker. True to his word, Ethan Carter arrived at the cafe in no time. "Daddy!" As soon as Emily saw Ethan Carter, she jumped off her seat and ran into his arms. "Emily, I'm glad you're okay." Ethan Carter scanned his daughter from head to toe, ensuring she was unharmed. Then, he turned to Victoria White, his expression full of concern. "Mrs. White, are you injured?" "Other than losing my bag, I'm fine." Although Chloe Young hadn't returned yet, Victoria White felt much more at ease since Ethan Carter's arrival. However, her gaze remained fixed in the direction Chloe Young had gone. "Mrs. White, did your assistant go to report the incident to the police?" Ethan Carter asked casually, noticing Chloe Young was nowhere in sight and following Victoria White's line of sight. She chased after the thief. Chloe Young was tall and athletic, but a woman's strength often couldn't match a man's. She had been gone for quite some time, and Victoria White pursed her lips before turning to Ethan Carter for advice. "She hasn't returned yet. Do you think I should call the police?" Before Victoria White could finish her sentence, Ethan Carter suddenly pointed ahead with the hand not holding Emily and said, "Your assistant is back." Victoria White followed the direction of his finger and saw Chloe Young running toward them at full speed, clutching Victoria's bag tightly in her hands. "Mrs. White, here's your bag. I don't think anything is missing, but please check it to be sure," Chloe Young said breathlessly as she handed the bag back to Victoria. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Victoria White opened her bag to check. Her passport, phone, cash, and credit card were all intact. The leather of the bag was slightly worn, but fortunately, nothing was missing. Only then did Victoria White breathe a sigh of relief. Chloe Young, thank you. Victoria White zipped up her bag, her eyes filled with gratitude as she looked at Chloe Young, though a hint of doubt lingered. You got my bag back, but where's the thief? He ran really fast. I tried to chase him but couldn't catch up. It was such a coincidence, he ran right into the corner where we arrived. The hotel driver, Caddy, was resting outside his car and saw someone sprinting past. He instinctively stuck out his leg, and the thief tripped, dropping your bag. I caught up and twisted his arm, he had no chance to escape. Chloe Young explained briefly. Chloe Young, you're amazing. Victoria White looked at Chloe Young with admiration. Despite just experiencing a dangerous situation, Chloe remained calm, which left Victoria deeply impressed. Were you an athlete before? You could say that. Hearing Victoria White's question, Chloe Young's expression became slightly awkward, and she hesitated to answer. Anyway, I really have to thank you today. Without your help, I doubt I could have gotten my bag back. Victoria White sincerely expressed her gratitude, not noticing Chloe Young's slightly peculiar tone. This is something I should do. Victoria White's heartfelt thanks made Chloe Young a bit flustered, and she quickly responded. The driver asked him a few questions. I tried asking in English, but I could only get some basic information. Sorry for taking so much time. Chloe Young apologized to Victoria White, then pointed in the direction she had just come from. The driver has already escorted him to the nearby police station. I brought your bag back first, but we'll all need to go to the station to file a report. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go quickly. Hearing that the thief had been taken to the police station, Victoria White finally felt completely at ease and decided to head to the station to complete the formalities. Following Chloe Young's guidance, Victoria White went straight to the police station. Meanwhile, Ethan Carter, after taking Emily Carter to buy bread and drinks at a cafe, also arrived at the station. He helped Victoria White, Emily Carter, and Chloe Young, who hadn't had breakfast yet, enjoy a hearty meal. Sorry, miss, the English-speaking officer isn't available today. We'll need to call for a translator for you. After waiting for a while, a female police officer in uniform approached Victoria White and the others, awkwardly explaining in English, the translator is a bit far away, so you'll need to wait a little longer. I can translate. Hearing this, Ethan Carter immediately raised his hand and repeated his offer in both Chinese and French. I studied in France and can serve as a French translator. Yes, my dad is great at French. Emily Carter quickly chimed in support, speaking in French. Miss, this gentleman has volunteered to act as a translator. What do you think? The female police officer glanced at Ethan Carter twice before seeking Victoria White's opinion. Of course, that's fine. Having spent some time with Ethan Carter, Victoria White found him trustworthy. After a brief moment of thought, she agreed. Chapter 22, Choosing Beautiful Things. After completing the registration procedures, it was nearly 12 o'clock. Victoria White's bag had its outer layer torn, and Chloe Young's clothes were covered with quite a bit of dust. Ethan Carter suggested everyone return to the Caddy Hotel so that Victoria White and Chloe Young could freshen up before heading out for lunch. Victoria White and Chloe Young went to their rooms to change their clothes and bags. As they stepped out, they ran into Emily Carter, who had also finished changing. The four of them headed to the restaurant on the lower floor, sitting around a small square table to enjoy lunch. While everyone was eating, Andrew Fields, who hadn't been seen all day, appeared with a panicked expression and walked up to Victoria White. Miss White. Director Fields, what are you doing here? Victoria White set her knife and fork down and looked up curiously. Miss White, I deeply apologize for not accompanying you on your outing, which led to such a robbery incident. Andrew Fields looked Victoria White up and down, and after confirming she wasn't injured, he let out a sigh of relief. If the boss finds out about such a major incident, surely I. This isn't your fault. The robbery was completely accidental. I believe your boss will understand. Seeing Andrew Field's pale face, looking even more terrified than herself, Victoria White couldn't help but offer a few comforting words. Miss White, I assure you, as long as you're in Paris, wherever you go, I will follow. Despite Victoria White not being injured, Andrew Fields was adamant about staying by her side. Director Fields, you're being overly dramatic. Victoria White didn't want to be followed by Andrew Fields and pointed to Chloe Young. My assistant is very capable. It was thanks to her that the issue got resolved this time. Having her with me is enough. You should focus on your own work. Then at the very least, when you're in the hotel, I must stay by your side. Seeing Victoria White's firm stance, Andrew Fields reluctantly compromised and took a step back. Victoria White thought for a moment. Although she still felt a bit uneasy about Andrew Fields and Vivian Moore, he was, after all, the director of the Caddy Hotel. She had no reason to stop him from performing his duties, so she nodded, that's fine. After Victoria White finished her lunch, Andrew Fields took the initiative to call a car for her. True to his promise, he only stood at the hotel entrance to see her off and did not follow her around like a shadow. The driver took Victoria White to the front of the SK flagship store in Paris. Aside from Emily Carter and Chloe Young, who were still accompanying her, Ethan Carter also arrived. While Victoria White was selecting dresses, Ethan Carter was busy making phone calls in the VIP lounge, seemingly attending to something important. To allow Victoria White to focus on choosing dresses for the advertisement shoot, the SK flagship store closed its doors to serve her exclusively. Over 1,000 exquisite and glamorous gowns in the store were at her disposal. The English-speaking store manager and several experienced staff members were dedicated to assisting her. Previously, Victoria White had reviewed the advertisement script for the Caddy Hotel. This time, the advertisement would feature 4 city-themed versions and 1 combined version. The romance of Paris, the purity of Santorini, the modernity of New York, and the sophistication of Linares cooperation would all be showcased in the ads. Each ad had a different focus, so the style of the dresses needed to vary accordingly. Under the guidance of the SK flagship store manager, Victoria White selected a tulle gown embroidered with glittering sequins for the Paris version, a light blue mermaid dress with lace for the Santorini version, and a nude evening gown with ruffles for the New York version. However, for the Linares cooperation version, which she valued the most, she still couldn't decide on the perfect dress. Victoria, I think this dress is so beautiful. Emily Carter exclaimed excitedly, pointing to a flowing pink tulle gown. Emily, today we need to choose dresses that match the advertisement's theme. Just being beautiful isn't enough. Emily Carter's enthusiasm touched Victoria White. She crouched down, hugged Emily, and patiently explained. Then. Emily tilted her head, thinking hard but unable to come up with anything before she spotted Ethan Carter walking out of the VIP lounge. She immediately waved at him, Victoria, Daddy has a great eye for dresses. Let him help you pick one. Emily, Daddy thinks all the dresses here are beautiful. How about I buy one for you? You can choose whichever you like, Ethan Carter said as he walked over, picking out a few dresses from the nearby rack filled with children's evening gowns. Yes, yes. Emily's eyes lit up as she saw the dresses in Ethan's hands. Daddy is the best. Ethan Carter smiled, handed the dresses to a store employee waiting nearby, and spoke a few words in French to them. The staff then took Emily by the hand and led her toward the fitting room. Emily is off trying on dresses now, Mrs. White. Shall we continue picking yours? Ethan Carter approached Victoria White, giving her a once-over before glancing at the 3 dresses she had already chosen. These must be for the 3 foreign city ads, right? Have you decided on one for Linares cooperation yet? Not yet, advertising for Linares is the top priority, but choosing an outfit is too difficult. Ethan Carter immediately noticed Victoria White's idea of selecting a dress, which slightly surprised her, but at the same time, she felt a bit of anticipation. Perhaps Ethan Carter would offer her some useful advice. The Linares Cady International Hotel has a white exterior, so choosing a white dress might fit the theme better and wouldn't clash with these other dresses. Ethan Carter, unaware of Victoria White's thoughts, spoke without hesitation. "I think so too." Victoria White agreed with Ethan Carter's suggestion. She then shifted her gaze to the dress rack, pondering which white dress would be most suitable for the advertisement shoot. "This one doesn't seem bad." While Victoria White was still deciding, Ethan Carter had already moved to the other side of the store. He selected a long gown from the row of dresses and brought it over to show Victoria White, a shimmering white satin evening gown with a V-neckline. The upper part was adorned with floral appliques and tiny diamonds, while the skirt featured soft pleats. With a slight sway, the dress moved gracefully like rippling water, exuding a lively and elegant charm. "This dress is truly beautiful." Seeing the gown Ethan Carter had chosen, Victoria White couldn't help but admire his impeccable taste. "This piece is indeed stunning." Victoria White was impressed by Ethan Carter's selection. His eye for fashion was undeniably remarkable. "Mrs. White, Mr. Carter's sense of style is exceptional." Chloe Young, who had been quietly observing Victoria White pick out dresses, couldn't help but praise the gown Ethan Carter chose. "I wonder how it would look when worn." "You'll know once you try it on." Ethan Carter stepped forward, handing the dress to Victoria White and gesturing toward the fitting room. Guided by a store employee, Victoria White carried the dress Ethan Carter had selected into the fitting room. Just as she stepped out after changing, Emily Carter emerged from the children's fitting room. "Emily Carter, you." Emily Carter was also wearing a white formal dress. Victoria White was about to compliment how adorable Emily looked in her dress when Emily suddenly widened her eyes, standing frozen in place. "Emily Carter, what's wrong?" Thinking the little girl might not feel well, Victoria White quickly approached her to check. Emily didn't respond immediately. Instead, she suddenly grabbed the hem of Victoria White's dress and, in awe, exclaimed, "Miss Victoria, you're so beautiful, so incredibly beautiful." "Emily Carter, don't pull on Mrs. White's dress like that, you'll ruin it." Ethan Carter, who had been waiting for Victoria White to come out, frowned slightly at the scene and stepped forward to stop Emily. "Oh, I'm sorry." Ethan's words startled Emily, and she quickly let go. Victoria White, amused by the little girl's adorable reaction, chuckled and took Emily's small hand, leading her to stand together in front of the large floor-to-ceiling mirror. "Mrs. White, you look absolutely stunning in this dress." The store manager stepped forward, adjusting the hem of Victoria White's gown and complimenting her in English, "This dress looks as if it was custom-made for you. Mrs. White, I think this is the perfect dress for the Linares advertisement." Chloe Young also stood up and joined Victoria White, sincerely praising, "This dress is even more beautiful than the previous three." "Mr. Carter, what do you think?" Although the reactions from everyone made it clear how well the dress suited her, Victoria White still wanted to confirm with Ethan Carter. "I feel like adding a new passage to my upcoming book," Ethan Carter said, his gaze fixed on Victoria White, though his words drifted to another topic. The heroine, dressed in a dazzling white evening gown, instantly transforms into a flawless goddess, captivating everyone at the party. Ethan Carter did not outwardly answer Victoria White's question, but she understood what he meant. Victoria White slightly curled her lips into a somewhat awkward smile, then she spoke in English to the manager, "I'll take this dress. Please wrap all 4 of them for me. Thank you." Chapter 23, The Iron Tower Lights Up. Leaving the main SK store, the sky had already turned dusky. Victoria White handed the chosen clothes to Chloe Young and began pondering what to eat for dinner. The hotel food was delicious, but she still wanted to try something more unique. "Victoria, the Christmas market on Champs-Élysées is super lively. Let's go check it out together." Emily Carter, holding a newly purchased dress, was carried over by Ethan Carter to Victoria White, eagerly inviting her. "Do they have good food there?" Victoria White looked directly at Emily Carter and asked. "There's tons of delicious food, so much of it." Emily Carter nodded enthusiastically, afraid Victoria White might refuse. "All right, let's go take a look then." Not wanting to disappoint Emily Carter, Victoria White quickly agreed. After getting into the car, Ethan Carter gave the Christmas market's address to the driver. The car swiftly headed towards Champs-Élysées. "Dad, I want that one." Suddenly, Emily Carter spotted something like a treasure and pointed excitedly at a distant stall. "No problem." Ethan Carter carried Emily Carter towards the direction she was pointing, while Victoria White and Chloe Young stayed behind to wait. Ethan Carter exchanged a few words with the vendor, who then bowed his head to prepare something. Emily Carter waved at Victoria White and Chloe Young, signaling them to come over. "Emily, what are you buying?" Victoria White asked curiously as she approached, noticing the vendor's stall was filled with round, red items that she couldn't quite identify. "Dad said these are called love apples." Emily Carter received 2 skewers from the vendor, handing one to Victoria White and the other to Chloe Young. "They're super tasty." "Thank you, Emily." Victoria White accepted the skewer from Emily Carter. Upon closer inspection, she saw it was an apple coated in a thick layer of sugar. The glossy red glaze sparkled brilliantly under the light. The group continued strolling, eating, and playing as they explored, quickly making their way through the bustling street. Victoria White managed to buy a few interesting small trinkets, and Ethan Carter took Emily Carter to enjoy a mini train ride and a giant slide, making the little girl laugh gleefully. "Dad, I'm sleepy now." After wandering Champs-Élysées until nearly 8 p.m., Emily Carter, tired from playing, nestled into Ethan Carter's arms and murmured drowsily. "It's almost 8 p.m. Don't you want to see the Eiffel Tower lights?" Ethan Carter gently adjusted Emily Carter's hat to keep her warm and softly asked. "Dad and Victoria, you two go ahead. I'll wait in the car for everyone," Emily Carter yawned, speaking unclearly. While they were talking, the group reached the car. Once everyone was seated, the driver asked if they wanted to return to the hotel. Victoria White hesitated. She really wanted to see the Eiffel Tower lit up, but Emily Carter was already sleepy. If Ethan Carter only took her to see the lights, who would look after Emily Carter? Sensing Victoria White's concern, Emily Carter sleepily glanced at Chloe Young, who was sitting next to her, and pointed her tiny finger at her. "When you all go see the lights, I'll stay with the assistant." Hearing Emily Carter's suggestion, Ethan Carter looked at Victoria White for her opinion. Victoria White, in turn, left the decision to Chloe Young. "Chloe, would you mind staying here with Emily Carter?" "No problem," Chloe Young replied, looking at the drowsy Emily Carter. Her usually vigilant demeanor while out in public softened significantly at that moment. With Chloe Young's reassurance, Victoria White finally felt at ease. Ethan Carter gave the driver an address, and the car stopped at a place resembling a palace. Once the car came to a halt, Ethan Carter carefully handed Emily Carter over to Chloe Young, ensuring the little girl lay comfortably in her arms. "Victoria, one more thing." Just as Victoria White and Ethan Carter were about to step out of the car, Emily Carter reached out to Victoria White. "Can you save your phone number on my watch?" Thanks to Emily Carter's watch, they were able to call Ethan Carter for help earlier today. Adding her number to the watch for easier contact in the future didn't seem like a bad idea. "Sure. Chloe, can you help me save my number?" "I'll be back soon," Victoria White instructed Chloe Young. After Chloe nodded in agreement, Victoria White left with Ethan Carter. Ethan Carter led Victoria White into the palace. Victoria followed him somewhat dazedly, noticing that he seemed a bit rushed. However, he still made an effort to be considerate of her high heels, maintaining a steady pace, a true gentleman. Though it was dark and hard to see everything around them, Ethan Carter seemed very familiar with the place. He guided Victoria White to a vast square, at the center of which stood the Eiffel Tower. Victoria looked around and noticed many small groups of people, some taking photos, others checking their watches. She glanced at her phone and saw it was 7:59 p.m., just about to strike 8. Countdown to the lights, 1 more minute. Ethan Carter pointed toward the Eiffel Tower in the distance and pulled out his phone, showing Victoria White the countdown timer. When there were only 15 seconds left, the crowd in the square began counting down. Caught up in the excitement, Victoria White couldn't help but join in, counting in English, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The moment the lights turned on, the entire Eiffel Tower sparkled with golden brilliance. The people in the square, who had been eagerly awaiting this moment, cheered with joy. Victoria White felt as though time had frozen. She gazed at the tower for a long while, her breath catching as the lights and the tower merged into one mesmerizing sight. Finally, she exhaled deeply, voicing her heartfelt admiration. "It's so beautiful. I forgot to tell you, this is the Chalet Palace." Ethan Carter, with his hands in his pockets, casually stepped closer to Victoria White, letting his arm brush against her shoulder. "I used to come here often. Whenever I lacked inspiration, I'd take a stroll here, watch tourists having fun, admire the ever-changing sunsets, and gaze at the Iron Tower shimmering with lights. Each visit brought me different kinds of inspiration. This place truly is wonderful," Victoria White said softly as she listened to Ethan Carter share his stories of inspiration. She looked around, thinking about how this very place had sparked so much creativity for Cassel. Her fondness for the Chalet Palace grew even stronger. "All right, the Eiffel Tower lights are off now. We should head back," Ethan Carter said after a few brief moments of darkness. He turned and gestured for Victoria White to follow him back the way they came. "Actually, I had planned to take you somewhere else today, but I couldn't book a spot there. We'll have to save it for another time." "When is another time?" Victoria White asked curiously. "Tomorrow," Ethan Carter replied with a deliberately mysterious tone. "You have a photo shoot tomorrow, right? I'll bring Emily Carter to meet you. Once you're done, we'll head out, and make sure to dress formally." Chapter 24, The Carriage Ride. On the same day Victoria White chose a long dress, the advertising film crew also arrived in Paris. This time, the entire advertisement shooting process was handled by Caddy Advertising, a subsidiary of the Caddy Group. Previously, Victoria White had collaborated with this company on several advertising campaigns, including the clothing promotion for SK. Under Andrew Field's arrangement, the film crew completed all preparations. When Victoria White returned to the hotel, the director had a brief discussion with her. Since they were familiar collaborators who had worked together many times, both understood each other's working styles, making the discussion proceed smoothly. After agreeing on a few details, they scheduled the official shoot to begin the next morning. Early the next morning, Victoria White wore a light chiffon dress embroidered with gold threads. The makeup and styling experts gave her a hairstyle and golden-toned makeup that matched the advertisement's theme and outfit. She then began the photo shoot in the studio. After a long day of shooting, Victoria White maintained her energy and worked seamlessly with the photographer. After the lunch break, Ethan Carter brought Emily Carter to the set. His assistant set up a table in the corner of the studio so Ethan could work on his laptop. Meanwhile, Emily Carter was engrossed in watching Victoria White's photo shoot, but her excitement waned over time. By the time the final scene wrapped up at 5 p.m., Emily Carter had rested her head on Ethan Carter's knees, dozing off. Victoria White thanked the staff for their hard work throughout the day, then went to the dressing room to change out of the advertisement outfit into a white dress she had brought. When she stepped out of the dressing room and sat in front of the makeup mirror, she noticed the makeup artist, who had always worked with her, looking at her with a somewhat peculiar expression. "What's wrong?" Victoria White asked curiously, removing her earrings while looking at the makeup artist through the mirror. "Nothing, it's just that you seem a bit different today compared to usual." The makeup artist approached and began removing Victoria White's makeup. Do you have any plans for tonight? Yes, CEO Carter said he wanted to take me somewhere and told me to wear something formal. Victoria White closed her eyes, allowing the makeup artist to help her, but then suddenly remembered something and opened them. Maybe I shouldn't remove my makeup after all. Of course, you should. Your current makeup doesn't match formal attire at all. The makeup artist paused, eyeing Victoria White's dress, which looked no different from casual wear, with a slightly puzzled expression. That outfit doesn't really qualify as formal attire, does it? Why not change into an evening gown? This is the closest thing I have to formal wear. Victoria White glanced down at her outfit and replied nonchalantly, every time I attend an event, SK sponsors my evening gowns, so I don't need to buy any. I can save that money for other things. Alright, I see. I'll still remove your current makeup and apply a lighter, more fitting look. The makeup artist responded helplessly, signaling Victoria White to close her eyes again before continuing to remove her makeup and apply a fresh layer. When Victoria White stepped out of the dressing room, the once bustling film set was now quiet, leaving only Ethan Carter, Emily Carter, and Chloe Young waiting for her. Emily Carter was sound asleep, leaning against Ethan Carter. Seeing the little girl's drowsy state, Victoria White couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. Mrs. White, are we ready to go? Ethan Carter stepped forward and asked softly as soon as Victoria White appeared. I'm ready, but Emily Carter. Victoria White hesitated, glancing at the still sleepy Emily Carter. Shouldn't we take her back to the hotel to rest instead? It's all right, I can take care of Emily Carter, Chloe Young said as she stepped in to assist Ethan Carter. Mr. Carter and I already discussed this earlier, and Emily Carter agreed as well. Okay. At that moment, Emily Carter woke up, rubbed her eyes, and stretched her arms toward Chloe Young, signaling that she wanted to be carried. Can we leave now? Ethan Carter raised his hand, pointing toward the exit. Victoria White nodded and followed him out of the studio. Are we ready to depart now? Ethan Carter raised his hand, gesturing towards the direction of the exit. Victoria White nodded again and, under his lead, exited the photo studio. Outside the studio, the hotel car was already waiting by the door. The four of them got into the car, and Ethan Carter gave the driver an address. Victoria White found the location he mentioned somewhat familiar, but before she could ask for clarification, the car headed straight toward the area near the Eiffel Tower. Are we going up the tower tonight? Victoria White asked as she stepped out of the car, her eyes fixed on the magnificent Eiffel Tower in front of her. The excitement and awe she felt from seeing the tower lit up the night before still lingered. Tonight, we'll do something even more exciting than going up the tower, Ethan Carter replied mysteriously. He looked around but didn't see the person he was expecting, so he made a quick phone call. After a brief exchange, two horse-drawn carriages, driven by coachmen in vintage attire, pulled up in front of them. Victoria White stared wide-eyed in disbelief. Did Paris still have such traditional carriages? We'll take a ride in the carriages first, and then we'll head up the tower for dinner, Ethan Carter briefly explained the evening's plan to Victoria White. Hearing that they'd ride carriages and then dine atop the tower, Victoria White couldn't help but feel thrilled. Ethan Carter chatted briefly with the second coachman before signaling for Chloe Young, who was holding Emily Carter, to come closer. He helped the coachman assist Chloe Young and Emily Carter onto one of the carriages, then turned to the first carriage. Climbing aboard himself, he extended a hand to Victoria White, carefully helping her up. Good afternoon, you two. I'll be your guide today. Our carriage route will take us through the Champs-Élysées, the Arc de Triomphe, the Palais de Chaillot, and back to our starting point. The entire journey will take about an hour. Along the way, I'll introduce some of the famous landmarks nearby. Please make yourselves comfortable, our trip is about to begin, the coachman introduced himself in English after the two were seated. He then urged the horse forward, following the planned route. So, do you like this experience? Ethan Carter noticed that Victoria White's dress seemed a bit thin. He reached for a blanket nearby and gently draped it over both of them. Sharing the same blanket, the atmosphere inside the carriage suddenly turned slightly intimate. Is Chloe Young joining us for dinner tonight too? Victoria White felt her ears growing hot. She quickly turned her face away, pretending to admire the scenery as she casually asked. Yesterday, your bag was stolen, and both you and Emily Carter were frightened. Chloe Young helped you retrieve your bag, so tonight's dinner is both to reassure you two and to thank Chloe Young, Ethan Carter replied, subtly leaning closer to Victoria White. The two were now very close, and his voice grew softer, almost teasing. Besides, Emily Carter seems to enjoy clinging to Chloe Young lately, which gives us a little more time to ourselves. I don't want to live alone with you. Victoria White glanced at Ethan Carter, deliberately using a cold tone. Really? Then it seems my charm isn't enough yet. I'll have to try harder, Ethan Carter chuckled softly, not exposing Victoria White's lie. Ethan Carter's words made Victoria White's ears turn even redder. She didn't know what other tactics Ethan Carter might have, but very few people could get this close to their idol. As long as Ethan Carter didn't cross the boundaries of friendship, she didn't mind interacting with him more. His words caused Victoria White's ears to flush an even deeper red. She wasn't sure what other moves Ethan Carter might use, but it was rare for anyone to be this close to their idol. As long as Ethan Carter didn't do anything beyond the limits of friendship, she didn't feel uncomfortable with further interactions with him. Dear guests, today's tour has come to an end. Please take your belongings and disembark. Wishing you both a pleasant dinner. An hour had passed quickly during their conversation, and the carriage had returned to the area near the Eiffel Tower. After the coachman bid them farewell, Ethan Carter generously gave him a large tip before carefully helping Victoria White down from the carriage. At the same time Ethan Carter helped Victoria White down, Chloe Young, holding Emily Carter, also stepped out of the second carriage. Emily, who had been drowsy earlier, was now fully awake after her nap. However, the little girl didn't ask for Ethan Carter to carry her. Instead, she obediently stayed nestled in Chloe Young's arms as they all headed toward the Eiffel Tower. The restaurant where they were dining that evening had a private entrance at the base of the tower. After Ethan Carter provided the reservation details to the receptionist, a staff member guided them to the restaurant's private entrance. The four of them then took the elevator to the second floor. A server led them to their reserved table, which was situated right by the window. Victoria White casually glanced out and noticed that the palace across the river looked somewhat familiar. Mr. Carter, is that the place we visited yesterday? Victoria White looked at the palace, uncertain if it was the Palais de l'Élysée, so she asked Ethan Carter. Yes, that's the Palais de l'Élysée. I specifically requested a window-side table with a view of it, Ethan Carter confirmed, nodding at Victoria White's guess. Filming officially starts tomorrow. I received news this afternoon that the guests for the Star Speed Race show have already arrived in Paris, Ethan Carter said casually on their way back to the hotel. During the earlier episodes filmed domestically, I heard from the staff that Lucas King kept asking why the host in the domestic episodes wasn't you. Could it be that he joined this program because of me? Upon hearing Ethan Carter's recount, Victoria White couldn't help but laugh. Not exactly. After all, he was selected as a guest before you. But his decision to return to the country to develop his career, I think that might be because of you. As Ethan Carter finished speaking, he looked directly at Victoria White, his gaze carrying a hint of probing curiosity. Yet, that deep look was quickly masked by a teasing remark. Originally, I wanted to sign a contract with you for the company, but it seems now I'll pass. During meals, no talking about work. Seeing the two starting to discuss work again, Emily Carter, sitting in the high chair, gently tapped the table with her hand to express her disapproval. All right, no more talking about work. Let's focus on eating. Ethan Carter reached out to pat Emily Carter's little head, soothing her as he spoke. Chapter 25, Mixed Blood. After dinner at the Eiffel Tower, at 9 p.m., the four returned to the hotel. Upon arrival, the production team of Star Speed Race sought out Victoria White and Ethan Carter for a meeting. Once it was confirmed that Victoria White had memorized the script for hosting the program, and Ethan Carter promised to consistently observe the guests' performances to provide feedback for each team, the director allowed them to return to their rooms to rest. In reality, Victoria White's workload for Star Speed Race was even lighter than Ethan Carter's, who served as a guest commentator. During the filming day in Paris, after Victoria White delivered the opening lines and gave hints to the participants, the team set off on their own, marking the end of her responsibilities. She only needed to stay in the monitoring room to watch the footage sent by the teams and occasionally discuss a team's performance with Ethan Carter. What surprised Victoria White was Ethan Carter's multitasking abilities. Not only could he maintain a routine of checking the monitoring screens every few minutes, but he also managed to use his computer to handle work back home. After finishing his tasks, he could still watch the screens while writing scripts. Victoria White stole a glance at his computer screen a few times. Although it was just a fragment of a novel and she couldn't see the entire story, the section was flawless in logic and grammar, with precise wording and smooth storytelling. Being able to focus in such a noisy environment while multitasking deeply impressed Victoria White. The final task for the star guests in Star Speed Race in Paris was to find envelopes containing plane tickets. Based on the departure times on the tickets, they would fly from Paris to the coastal city of Nice, France, to continue filming. Victoria White and Ethan Carter also traveled with the production team to Nice. During the filming process, Ethan Carter continued his multitasking routine. After the filming concluded, his feedback on the team's performances was detailed and accurate. Victoria White, who had doubted whether he was paying full attention to the monitoring screens, felt reassured after hearing his evaluations, no longer worried that his multitasking would affect the filming. After the Nice segment wrapped up on December 23, the production team planned a one-day break in Nice before flying to Athens to film the Greek segment. Since the filming schedule was quite exhausting, the celebrity guests unanimously chose to rest at the hotel. Only Sophia Collins, accompanied by her assistant, went to the Côte d'Azur for an interior photo shoot for a women's magazine by Linares Cooperation. Victoria White initially planned to use her free time to take a stroll around Nice, but upon the enthusiastic invitation of Ethan Carter and Emily Carter, she decided to join them in visiting the locals and observing the everyday life of the people in Nice. Early the next morning, Ethan Carter drove the car himself, taking Victoria White and Emily Carter from the hotel towards the outskirts of Nice. After driving for several dozen minutes, Ethan Carter stopped the car in front of a white villa nestled among lush green trees. He got out, opened the car door for Victoria White, and then went to the trunk to retrieve some gifts. Victoria White carried Emily Carter out of the car. Emily Carter, appearing quite familiar with the place, ran toward the villa gate, speaking in French that Victoria White couldn't understand, while tiptoeing to press the doorbell. Woof woof. Hearing the sound outside, a brown poodle ran out from the house, barking toward the gate. Sissai. A woman quickly emerged from the house and opened the gate for Emily Carter. As soon as the gate opened, the woman embraced Emily Carter tightly. Ethan Carter, holding the gifts, stepped into the yard. After exchanging greetings with the woman using the traditional cheek-kissing gesture, he began introducing her to Victoria White. Mrs. White, let me introduce you, this is Emily Carter's grandmother, Mrs. Irina. Hello, Mrs. White. Irina extended her hand to shake hands with Victoria White. Victoria White observed Irina. Although she exuded an elegant and graceful demeanor, it was evident that she was of an older age. Since Emily Carter was over 3 years old, Victoria White guessed that Irina might be around the same age as her own mother. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Irina. You can call me Katie, Victoria White said as she extended her hand to shake Irina's, speaking in English. It's cold outside, let's talk inside. Irina said as she hugged Emily Carter and invited Ethan Carter and Victoria White into the house. Their pet dog followed closely behind them. Speaking fluent English, Irina asked, "Would you like coffee or tea?" "I'll have coffee, thank you," Victoria White replied. "I agree," Ethan Carter chimed in. "All right, you two wait in the living room for a bit. I'll be right back." Irina placed Emily Carter on a thick children's play mat, letting her play with the family dog. After Victoria White and Ethan Carter sat down on the sofa, Irina went into the kitchen to brew some coffee. Victoria White watched Irina head into the kitchen to make coffee, then turned to Ethan Carter with a questioning look. "Is Irina Emily Carter's grandmother's sister?" Irina is Emily Carter's grandmother's younger sister. She's not married yet. Emily Carter's grandparents have both passed away, so Irina is her only relative in France, Ethan Carter said softly, glancing at Emily Carter playing nearby. "Emily Carter has French heritage?" Victoria White raised her eyebrows in surprise upon hearing Ethan Carter's words. Emily Carter appeared to be a completely Asian child, so it was unexpected to learn she had French blood. "That's right. Emily Carter is 1/4 French. Although she doesn't look much like a mixed-race child, I've always insisted on teaching her French. Even her nanny speaks French," Ethan Carter explained. "But there's a downside to this, Emily Carter's English isn't very good, so she's a bit behind her classmates in kindergarten." Victoria White had initially planned to ask if Emily Carter's mother had prominent mixed-race features, but she felt she might be prying too much. Just then, Irina returned to the living room with the coffee, and Victoria White decided to drop the question. She chatted casually with Irina for a while. Later, Irina mentioned wanting to go shopping and asked Ethan Carter to help carry the items. Victoria White offered to assist, but Irina politely declined and suggested that Victoria White stay home to watch Emily Carter. Victoria White spent 2 hours playing with Emily Carter at home. When Irina and Ethan Carter returned, they brought back a Christmas tree, decorations, cooking ingredients, and a princess dress for Emily Carter. "Mrs. White, this dress for Emily Carter is a bit complicated to put on. Could you lend a hand?" Ethan Carter showed Victoria White the pink princess dress and added, "Afterward, I might also need your help decorating the Christmas tree. I'll be busy assisting Irina with dinner preparations and won't have time for this." "I don't mind, but we'll have to see if Emily Carter agrees." Victoria White took the princess dress and tilted her head to ask Emily Carter, "Emily Carter, would you like me to help you put on this pretty dress?" "Yes." Emily Carter responded enthusiastically, clearly excited at the idea. She let Victoria White lead her upstairs to the second-floor bedroom. Once the dress was on, they came back downstairs together. Chapter 26, A Special Christmas Gift. At 8 in the evening, the Christmas tree was fully decorated, and the Christmas dinner officially began. Under the twinkling lights of the tree, Irina sat on one side of the long table. Ethan Carter chose the seat to her right, while Victoria White naturally took the seat to her left. Everyone thought Emily Carter would sit next to Ethan Carter, but unexpectedly, the little girl climbed up and sat beside Victoria White, obediently staying by her side. "Emily Carter, this is a gift I prepared for you. Open it and see if you like it," Irina said, producing a beautifully wrapped gift box like a magician after everyone was seated, handing it to Emily Carter. "Thank you, Irina," Emily Carter politely said as she began unwrapping the gift. Inside was a set of English comic books. "I don't understand these," Emily Carter muttered in Chinese as she flipped through a few pages, not grasping the meaning of the books. Emily Carter needs to study English well, just like Katie, Irina encouraged her, even though she didn't understand Chinese, guessing Emily Carter's thoughts. "Katie is very good at English. If Emily Carter tries hard, she'll definitely excel in English." Victoria White reached out to gently pat Emily Carter's head, softly encouraging her. "All right then," Emily Carter replied, though not very enthusiastically. Still, she accepted the gift and thanked Irina again. "Thank you, Irina. Emily Carter, here's a gift from Daddy, Ethan Carter said, noticing Emily Carter's lack of excitement. He handed her his gift. You'll definitely like this one. Let me see. Emily Carter eagerly took the gift from Ethan Carter and opened it to find a small crown inside. Her eyes immediately lit up. This crown is so beautiful. Victoria White took a closer look and saw that the small crown in the box was exquisitely crafted, shimmering brilliantly under the lights. Though small, it was perfect for a little girl like Emily Carter. Sister Victoria, can you help me put it on? Emily Carter took the small crown out of the box and handed it to Victoria White, asking her to help wear it. All right. Victoria White carefully took the small crown and placed it gently on Emily Carter's little head, adjusting her hair to make her look even prettier. Miss Victoria, what Christmas gift are you going to give me? As soon as the crown was on, Emily Carter immediately asked Victoria White for a present. I. Victoria White, who had been hurriedly brought here by Ethan Carter today, hadn't prepared any gifts. Now that everyone was looking at her, she regretted not bringing something along earlier. Emily Carter, don't be rude. Seeing Victoria White's awkwardness, Ethan Carter softly advised Emily Carter, Mrs. White is a guest, you shouldn't ask for gifts from a guest. But I really want a gift. Emily Carter blinked her big, sparkling eyes as she looked at Victoria White. What kind of gift does Emily Carter want? If I can, I'll definitely give it to you, Victoria White sincerely said as she held Emily Carter's tiny hand. Or how about I make it up to you with a gift when I return home? No, I want a gift you can give me now, Emily Carter said firmly. She grabbed Victoria White's hand, climbed onto her chair, and then stepped over to Victoria White's seat. I want you to take a photo with me. A photo together? That's no problem. Hearing Emily Carter's request, Victoria White let out a sigh of relief. She hugged Emily Carter and looked over at Ethan Carter, who was seated nearby. Mr. Carter, could you help take a photo of me and Emily Carter? Of course. Ethan Carter pulled out his phone, opened the camera, and aimed it at Victoria White and Emily Carter. Get ready, 3, 2, 1, smile. Victoria White flashed a bright smile, showing her neat row of teeth, while Emily Carter seemed a bit distracted. Just as Ethan Carter pressed the button to take the picture, Emily Carter quickly turned her head and planted a kiss on Victoria White's cheek with a loud smack. Everything happened so fast that Victoria White hadn't even reacted before Irina and Ethan Carter were visibly startled. Wow, Emily Carter! Irina exclaimed upon seeing Emily Carter's actions. Katie is going to feel so jealous. Emily Carter, that was inappropriate. Ethan Carter was visibly shocked by Emily Carter's behavior. He put down the phone and sternly said, apologize to Mrs. White immediately. I am sorry. Seeing Ethan Carter's unusually serious expression, Emily Carter stammered as she apologized to Victoria White. She then softly explained, I really wanted to see a video of Miss Victoria for my birthday before, but all I got was a blurry picture of her looking down. I couldn't help myself just now. Victoria White recalled that over a month ago, Ethan Carter had indeed asked her for a video for Emily Carter, but she had declined because of Sophia Collins. In the end, Emily Carter only received a photo of her reading at a book-sharing event. Thinking from this perspective, perhaps Emily Carter's actions were simply out of longing. Emily Carter, I understand how you feel, but next time before doing anything, you must ask for permission, okay? Victoria White looked at Emily Carter snuggling in her arms with a pitiful expression, her heart softening. She hugged Emily tightly and gently said, all right, let me show you how it's done. Emily Carter, I'd like to kiss you on the cheek, is that okay? Okay. Emily Carter sniffled, hesitating. Victoria White lowered her head, planted a light kiss on Emily's round cheek, and smiled, there, it's done. Now we're even. Hee hee. Thanks to Victoria White's gesture, Emily Carter finally beamed with joy. Thank you, Sister Victoria. I love this gift so much. Alright, let's eat now. Although still slightly upset, Ethan Carter admired Victoria White's way of handling the situation. He set his phone down and called everyone to start the meal. Victoria White helped Emily Carter back to her seat, and the four of them enjoyed a lively feast together. To take care of Emily, Victoria even specially cut the turkey leg into small pieces and placed them on her plate. With Victoria's assistance, Emily had an incredibly delightful meal. After finishing the Christmas feast, Irina and Ethan Carter headed to the kitchen to wash the dishes. Irina still refused Victoria White's help, saying she wanted to have a private chat with Ethan. Left with no choice, Victoria stayed in the living room to continue playing with Emily Carter. "Little pup, I'm your mommy, and you're my precious baby, can you say that?" Emily Carter teased the little poodle while speaking slowly. "Woof woof." The poodle, not understanding Chinese, simply barked back at Emily. The word mommy that Emily said suddenly stirred a sense of doubt in Victoria White's mind. Having known Ethan Carter and Emily Carter for so long, she realized she had never met Emily's mother. Today was Christmas, and if Emily's mother indeed had French heritage, this would be an important holiday for her. Yet, even on such a significant day, Emily's mother was nowhere to be seen. "Emily Carter, this Christmas, did your mom give you a present?" Victoria White, sitting across from Emily Carter, asked in a rather gentle tone. "Of course, she did." Emily Carter, busy playing with her poodle, looked up and replied, "The princess dress I'm wearing was a gift from my mom." "But I thought it was your dad who brought this gift home," Victoria White said, glancing at the small dress Emily Carter was wearing, gently reminding her. "Dad said my mom is overseas, very busy, and couldn't come home, so she sent the gift to me." "Every year, the Christmas gift is different," Emily Carter pouted. Victoria White had thought her question might make the little girl cry, but Emily Carter quickly brushed off her sadness and smiled brightly. "Dad said if I'm good, Mom will come back to me, so I have to be a good girl." "Sister Victoria, do you think I'm a good girl?" "Emily Carter is the most well-behaved and adorable child I've ever met." Emily Carter's resilience moved Victoria White, and she couldn't help but praise her. Hearing Victoria White's compliment, Emily Carter happily continued playing with her puppy, leaving Victoria White deep in thought. From what Emily Carter mentioned about her mom working abroad, Victoria could infer that there was some tension between Ethan Carter and his wife, which might explain why his wife rarely came home, not even for Christmas with their daughter. Thinking further, it seemed possible that Ethan Carter and his wife were on the verge of divorce. That might be why he still wore his wedding ring but never met with Emily Carter's mom. While outsiders might not know about this, those within Pinnacle Entertainment probably did. If that were true, it would be no surprise that Sophia Collins openly admired Ethan Carter. Who knows what Ethan Carter thought of Sophia Collins? If he reciprocated her feelings, Sophia Collins might soon become a member of the Carter family. Victoria White watched Emily Carter play as her thoughts wandered, only to suddenly snap back. What did the relationship between Ethan Carter and Sophia Collins have to do with her? "Victoria White, you're getting nosier by the day." Victoria White scolded herself internally. Then Emily Carter tugged at her hand, pulling her attention back as they played together with the little puppy. Chapter 27, An Unexpected Accident. Victoria White sat in the dressing room, flipping through the script for the Caddy Hotel Santorini advertisement, occasionally jotting down notes. Just as she was about to finish reading, a small figure sneakily slid into her dressing room. "Victoria." Emily Carter, holding the little bunny Victoria White had given her, suddenly appeared beside her, grinning as she called her name. "Emily Carter." Seeing Emily arrive, Victoria White set the script down. "Victoria, there's so much delicious food here. Let's go eat, shall we?" "Eat? Well, I'll have to search a bit." Victoria White pulled out her phone to look up good food in Athens. She discovered that Greek yogurt and ice cream were quite famous here, and the popular snack spots weren't far from the filming location. Looking at the food pictures on her screen, Victoria couldn't help but feel tempted. "Have you decided yet? Have you decided yet?" Emily Carter asked impatiently. "I've decided, but I can't just take you out without permission. You'll need to ask your dad if he agrees to let me take you." Victoria White gently patted Emily's head, coaxing her. "I'll go ask him right now." Emily Carter immediately dashed to the monitoring room next door. A few minutes later, Ethan Carter walked back into the dressing room, carrying Emily in his arms. "Mrs. White, I'd like to grab a bite too," Ethan Carter said as he approached Victoria White, leaning down slightly. "Mind if I join you and Emily?" "No problem at all." Victoria White didn't hesitate, quickly packing her bag before heading out with Ethan and Emily Carter. Following the directions on the A** map, the three of them walked about 10 minutes to reach the famous yogurt shop Victoria had found earlier. They sat by the window, and Victoria chatted with the shop owner in English for a while. Based on the owner's recommendation, they ordered 3 special goat yogurt servings unique to the shop. After a few minutes, the store staff brought over 3 servings of goat milk yogurt. The yogurt was thick and creamy, almost like a slice of cheese, with fresh honey drizzled on top. The sweetness of the honey blended perfectly with the yogurt, which had no unpleasant odor, creating an exquisite flavor. "Wow, this is so delicious." Emily Carter scooped up spoonful after spoonful, eating one bite after another, unable to stop herself. "Emily Carter, eat more gracefully, please." Ethan Carter, not touching the yogurt in front of him, took a napkin to wipe Emily Carter's mouth and gently reminded her, "No rush, eat slowly. I still have another serving that I can give you." "Mr. Carter, you don't like yogurt?" Victoria White, who was sharing yogurt with Emily Carter, asked. Just then, Ethan Carter's phone suddenly rang, interrupting the gaze he had directed at her. "Hello." Ethan Carter sighed inwardly and answered the call. "Yes, I'm listening." "What's wrong? Is it serious?" A few seconds later, Ethan Carter's tone suddenly turned stern. "Send me the address, I'll be there right away." Ethan Carter stood up, glanced outside to check for cars, and quickly hung up. Grabbing the jacket draped over his chair, he prepared to leave. "What happened?" Seeing Ethan Carter about to go, Victoria White asked in surprise. "There's a problem with the filming. I need to go check it out," Ethan Carter replied while putting on his jacket. He then turned to Victoria White for her opinion. "Miss White, would you like to stay and finish eating, or come along with me?" "I'll come with you." Victoria White, being part of the program team, naturally couldn't stand by if there were issues during filming. "All right, let's go together." Ethan Carter picked up Emily Carter, and the three left the yogurt shop. He hailed a taxi parked by the roadside, gave the driver the address, and the car quickly set off. In less than 10 minutes, they arrived at their destination. Victoria White realized it was a hospital. Finding the room they needed, she stepped inside and saw that the person resting on the bed was none other than Sophia Collins. "Sophia, what happened to you?" Ethan Carter, carrying Emily Carter, walked over and looked at Sophia Collins' bandaged leg with concern. "Mr. Carter, I twisted my ankle while doing the mountain climbing task." "It's nothing serious." Sophia Collins, who had been lying on her side playing on her phone, sat up when she saw Ethan Carter enter. "Miss White is here too." "Yes," Victoria White replied, her concern evident as she saw Sophia Collins injured. "What did the doctor say? Is it serious?" "The doctor advised me to rest for 2 days and avoid any strenuous activity," Sophia Collins replied honestly. "Dad, I'm so sleepy, I want to sleep." Little Emily Carter, being held by Ethan Carter, suddenly whined, "I don't like being here. But I still need to stay here a little longer." Ethan Carter looked down at Emily Carter, who was rubbing her eyes, with a slightly troubled expression. Can Emily Carter hold on for a bit longer? Mr. Carter, how about you stay here, and I take Emily Carter back to the hotel? Victoria White, who also didn't want to stay, decisively suggested. Emily Carter, how about you go back to the hotel with Miss Victoria to rest? I'll come back and play with you later, okay? Ethan Carter asked Emily. Okay. Emily Carter quickly replied, reaching out to Victoria White and transferring from Ethan Carter's arms to hers. Mr. Carter, then I'll take Emily Carter back first. Victoria White held Emily tightly, gave Sophia Collins one last glance, and then turned to leave. After Victoria White left with Emily Carter, Ethan Carter felt it necessary to inform Sophia Collins' father, John Collins, about the situation. He stepped out of the hospital room and made a call to John Collins from the hallway. Ethan Carter dialed John Collins' number, glanced at his watch, and calculated the time difference at Linares Cooperation, realizing it must be late at night over there. Hello. John Collins answered quickly, who's this? Hello, Mr. Collins. This is Ethan Carter from Pinnacle Entertainment. I apologize for disturbing your rest. Ethan Carter introduced himself and politely apologized. It's fine. I'm in New York, and it's morning here. John Collins' voice came through the line, sounding slightly surprised. What's the matter for you to call so suddenly? Well, Mr. Collins, during the filming of Star Speed Race, Sophia accidentally twisted her ankle, Ethan Carter explained cautiously. I wasn't on site at the time, but the staff immediately called a doctor to treat her. The doctor advised her to rest for a few days, but she insisted on continuing the shoot. I'm not sure if that's the matter with her is not my concern. Contact her mother. Contrary to the concern Ethan Carter had expected, John Collins seemed completely indifferent to Sophia Collins being injured. Where were you at that time? I was out with Victoria White, the host from Linares Broadcasting Network, Ethan Carter replied honestly. Emily Carter was with us as well. I heard Victoria White was in danger earlier in Paris. How is she doing now? Upon hearing Victoria White's name, John Collins appeared more interested and even proactively inquired about her situation. She wasn't hurt. The thief who stole her bag was taken to the police station, and the bag was retrieved, Ethan Carter explained, though he couldn't understand why the topic had shifted to Victoria White. I already know about that. How is her mood? John Collins persisted, focusing solely on Victoria White. She's probably fine, Ethan Carter replied cautiously, growing increasingly suspicious of John Collins' unusual attitude. Good to hear. John Collins seemed very satisfied with Ethan Carter's answer. If anything happens to Victoria White, you must inform me immediately. As for Sophia, just contact her mother. If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up now. Understood, CEO Collins. Goodbye. Despite lingering doubts in his mind, Ethan Carter bid farewell to John Collins and then called Shin Yu-hwan, Sophia Collins' mother. Chapter 28, The Birthday Invitation. Ethan Carter immediately called Shin Yu-hwan. As soon as he mentioned that Sophia Collins was injured, Shin Yu-hwan quickly responded, I know, I'll be there right away. Mrs. Collins, Sophia was injured in Athens, Ethan Carter reminded her. Where are you now? I'm in Athens. Send me the address, and I'll come immediately, Shin Yu-hwan said hurriedly before hanging up. Not long after sending the message to Shin Yu-hwan, she arrived at Sophia Collins's hospital room with another woman. The moment she saw her mother, Sophia Collins embraced her tightly and then hugged the other woman as well. Ethan Carter and the other woman left the hospital room to give the mother and daughter some privacy. Hello, General Manager Carter, I've admired your reputation for a long time. Once they were in the hospital corridor, the other woman handed Ethan Carter a business card with both hands. I'm Selena White, Sophia's godmother. Ms. White, it's an honor to meet you, Ethan Carter said, accepting the business card and handing over his own. I didn't expect to meet Ms. White here in Greece. I just came here to handle some matters and decided to visit Sophia while I was at it, Selina White smiled and explained. Actually, when you were in Paris earlier, I was there too. If I'm not mistaken, Ms. White, you're Victoria White's mother, Ethan Carter said, studying Selina White's face, which bore a striking resemblance to Victoria White. His tone was somewhat uncertain. But when Mrs. White was in Paris for a few days, you didn't appear alongside her. The relationship between Victoria and me is a bit complicated. When Ethan Carter mentioned Victoria White, Selina White's expression turned slightly uneasy. She forced a faint smile and said, honestly, if it weren't for Sophia's injury, I probably wouldn't have shown up here either. Please, General Manager Carter, keep this a secret and don't tell Victoria that I'm here, all right? Of course, Ethan Carter agreed, though he didn't understand the reason behind her request. After finishing her conversation with Ethan Carter, Selina White returned to Sophia Collins's hospital room. Meanwhile, Ethan Carter went to consult the doctor. Upon learning that Sophia Collins only needed a few days of rest to recover, he decided to speak with the program director to see if they could postpone the next leg of filming in Santorini. However, before Ethan Carter could negotiate with the director, Sophia Collins had already made an announcement in the Star Race WeChat group. She informed everyone that she would host a dinner for the entire crew tonight at the restaurant in the Caddy Athens Hotel. Victoria White initially had no intention of attending, but Emily Carter insisted on dining at the restaurant. Left with no choice, Victoria White brought the little girl to the venue. Once everyone was seated, the host of the evening's dinner, Shen Yu Huan, finally appeared. Sophia Collins, who was supposed to be resting in the hospital, also arrived in a wheelchair, pushed into the restaurant by Nathan Taylor. Thank you all for supporting my Sophia during the filming of Star Speed Race. This time, she got injured unexpectedly, disrupting the program team's plans, and I feel truly sorry. This dinner is our way of apologizing. Any losses caused by her injury, I will compensate for, Shen Yu Huan said, borrowing a staff member's microphone before the dinner began. Raising her glass, she addressed everyone, I hope you can accept our apology. No need, Mom. Sophia Collins, who had been sitting in a wheelchair, suddenly stood up, took the microphone, and said, it's just a sprain, nothing serious. Let's stick to the original schedule and head to Santorini tomorrow to start filming the next leg. Sophia. Everyone was stunned as soon as she spoke. Shen Yu Huan couldn't believe it and called out Sophia Collins' name, as though doubting what she had just heard. Mom, I'm really fine. Sophia Collins reassured her mother and even performed a little dance move on purpose. See? I'm perfectly. Okay. Alright, sit down quickly and don't move anymore. Fearing Sophia's injury might worsen, Shen Yu Huan hurriedly urged her to sit back down. You stay here and behave, I'll go toast everyone. The presence of Shen Yu Huan made Victoria White feel entirely uneasy. Watching Ethan Carter and Emily Carter cheerfully enjoying their meal beside her, she lost her appetite even more. When Shen Yu Huan came over to toast at their table, Victoria White reluctantly stood up, raising her glass of red wine. Shen Yu Huan approached Emily Carter from behind, first clinking glasses with everyone at the table, then specifically thanking Ethan Carter, who was seated to Emily's left. President Carter, I sincerely thank you for informing me this time. You're too kind, Mrs. Collins, Ethan Carter replied respectfully, clinking glasses with her. Emily Carter, eat more, all right? After clinking glasses with Ethan Carter, Shen Yu Huan affectionately patted Emily Carter's small head. Emily nodded vigorously, showing she wasn't at all resistant to Shen Yu Huan. Miss Victoria White. Just as Victoria White was about to sit down, Shen Yu Huan suddenly called her name, forcing her to turn back and face her. It's been a while. How have you been? I've been alright, Victoria White replied, looking at Shen Yu Huan standing before her. Her demeanor was gentle, and she wore a smile. Although Victoria hadn't met her many times, she always felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity with her. However, the thought of her identity made Victoria feel uneasy, even making her speech awkward. "Alright is good. Things will only get better from here," Shen Yuhuan said meaningfully, then raised her glass, initiating a toast with Victoria White. Hopefully. Though Victoria didn't want to interact with her, basic courtesy was a must. She reluctantly responded, clinking glasses with Shen Yuhuan before taking a small sip of red wine. After Shen Yuhuan left, Victoria White finally relaxed, sitting back down to continue her meal. "Emily Carter, Daddy's going over to Aunt Sunny's table for a bit. You stay here and eat, alright? I'll be back soon." Ethan Carter, having eaten a few bites, excused himself to Emily before moving to sit beside Sophia Collins. The two seemed to be discussing something, sitting very close together, which made Victoria White feel a bit uncomfortable. "Victoria." Just as Victoria White was absent-mindedly eating, someone suddenly called her name. Victoria looked up in confusion and realized it was Lucas King who had called her. "What's up?" "We're about to arrive in Santorini. I know a very famous restaurant there, how about we go there for dinner together?" Lucas King sat down in Ethan Carter's previous seat, and Emily Carter curiously looked at him. To prevent Emily Carter from interrupting his conversation with Victoria White, Lucas King spoke in English. "Of course, I know you're very busy. I can wait until you're done, and then we can go eat." "Why so sudden?" Victoria White had never dined alone with Lucas King before, and the idea made her feel a bit uneasy. "December 28th is my birthday. Normally, I celebrate it at home, but this year, I have to work and can't go back." Lucas King smiled and explained his reason. "My Chinese isn't very good, and communicating with others is quite exhausting, so I feel very comfortable talking to you." Victoria White glanced at Ethan Carter, who was happily chatting with Sophia Collins at the nearby table, and almost as if compelled by an unseen force, she agreed with Lucas King. "All right then." Chapter 29, The Interrupter. Since Sophia Collins insisted that her injury was fine and repeatedly assured everyone that she would take full responsibility if anything went wrong, the film crew had no choice but to comply with her wishes. They decided to stick to the original plan and fly to Santorini. The entire crew rested for a day before beginning the shoot. While the film crew took a break, Victoria White seized the opportunity to complete a photo shoot for the Caddy Santorini Hotel. Throughout the session, Ethan Carter and Emily Carter were nowhere to be seen. In contrast, Lucas King stayed in the studio, waiting for Victoria White. Once she finished the shoot and changed her clothes, Lucas King led her on a walk to a nearby seaside restaurant. "Why did you pick this restaurant?" Victoria White asked curiously as she sat down at a four-person table by the sea, glancing around at the sparsely populated establishment. "It's a perfect spot to watch the sunset," Lucas King replied, pointing toward the Aegean Sea, where the sun still hung high in the sky. "It's only 4 o'clock now. When will the sunset even happen?" Victoria White checked her watch, uncertain about when the sun would dip below the horizon. "I'm not sure either," Lucas King admitted, glancing around just as a waiter approached their table with menus. "Excuse me, what time does the sun set today?" "It's winter now, so the sun won't set until at least after 5 o'clock, the waiter said, handing menus to Victoria White and Lucas King. "Feel free to take a look at our menu." "No need to look. Just bring out all the restaurant's signature dishes," Lucas King said without glancing at the menu, ordering a selection of specialties. "Before the food arrives, bring us 2 glasses of Santorini's signature wine. We've got plenty of time, so we can take it slow. You're not planning to sit here for hours, are you?" Victoria White handed the menu back to the waiter, clearly not intending to linger too long with Lucas King. "Let's enjoy some wine, wait for the sunset, then have dinner. After dinner, we can have dessert and more wine. Heading back to the Caddy Hotel later won't be too late," Lucas King said, pulling his chair slightly closer to Victoria White. "I thought once we started filming Speed Star, I'd see you more often." But you've been nowhere to be found. It's rare to get a chance to have dinner with you like this. Besides hosting, I've been busy filming commercials too, so my schedule's been packed, Victoria White admitted. Hearing Lucas King's words, she suddenly realized that during her time in France, she had mostly been working with Ethan Carter and Emily Carter. Feeling a bit guilty, she lowered her head. Honestly, it's been a while since we last talked. There's so much I want to share with you, Lucas King said after clinking glasses with her. After we worked together on that magazine photo shoot for SK 6 years ago, I started thinking about my future and decided to go to university. You actually went to university? Victoria White asked, taking a sip of wine. Victoria White still remembered that it was her first time doing a magazine photo shoot in New York as the representative of SK, and the person shooting alongside her was none other than Lucas King. At that time, Lucas King was just a fresh high school graduate starting his modeling career. Upon learning that Victoria White had attended a prestigious school, Lucas King appeared deeply moved. Victoria White never expected that he would actually quit his job to focus on studying. Yes, I worked hard for a year and then went to university in Toronto. Now, when talking about his education, Lucas King finally displayed a bit of confidence. Victoria, I want to thank you. You were the one who gave me the motivation to strive for more. This is all because of your own efforts, there's no need to thank me. Victoria White smiled and continued sipping her wine. Victoria, I want to ask, are you still single? Seeing Victoria White smile and guessing that she was in a good mood, Lucas King seized the opportunity to ask. Before Victoria White could finish her sentence, a little girl suddenly ran up to her and threw herself into her lap. Hello, Miss Victoria. Emily Carter. Victoria White looked down and saw Emily Carter in a pink coat standing before her. Why are you here? I brought her, Ethan Carter said, walking over with his hands in his pockets. He answered Victoria White's question. I heard from Chloe Young that everyone was here, so I decided to bring Emily along. President Carter. Lucas King was about to say something when Ethan Carter clapped him on the shoulder and casually remarked, Lucas King, if I'm not mistaken, today is your 27th birthday, isn't it? Yes. Lucas King nodded. Then it seems we should celebrate properly. Ethan Carter turned and signaled to a nearby server. The server immediately approached and placed a carefully wrapped box on the table. Mind if I sit down? Ethan Carter pulled out an empty chair next to the table and asked Lucas King. Of course not, Lucas King replied, somewhat awkwardly. On the way here, Emily chose a birthday cake for you. I hope you'll like it, Ethan Carter said to Lucas King while opening the box, revealing an exquisite cake. Thank you, President Carter and Emily, Lucas King said politely as he glanced at Emily Carter, who was playfully clinging to Victoria White. The appearance of Ethan Carter and Emily Carter instantly dispelled the slightly ambiguous atmosphere that had been lingering at the gathering. Though Lucas King felt a bit unhappy about it, he had no choice but to accept the situation. Ethan Carter handed the cake knife to Lucas King. While Lucas King was cutting the cake, the server brought over a high chair for children. Ethan Carter lifted Emily Carter and placed her into the seat. Lucas King then cut 3 slices of cake, plated them, and handed them to the 3 of them. What were you all talking about earlier? Ethan Carter asked casually while eating his cake. Neither Lucas King nor Victoria White answered, prompting Ethan Carter to feign realization. Did Emily and I interrupt your conversation? Not at all, Victoria White replied, smiling as she looked at Emily Carter, who was engrossed in eating her cake. In truth, ever since Ethan Carter and Emily Carter had shown up, she felt much more at ease. At least now, she didn't have to face Lucas King alone. She wasn't unaware of his feelings, but she simply didn't want to reciprocate them. Actually, I don't want to trouble everyone, but filming for the Santorini segment starts tomorrow. Tonight, the production team wants to have a meeting at the Caddy Hotel. I already told the director that today is your birthday, Lucas King, so everyone will be coming later, Ethan Carter said, glancing at his watch and noticing it was already 4:30 p.m. We can have dinner and hold the meeting at the same time tonight, which will save quite a bit of time. But, Mr. Carter, you don't need to worry. I'll cover dinner tonight as my way of celebrating your birthday, Ethan Carter said, noticing Lucas King seemed like he wanted to say something else. He placed a hand on Lucas King's shoulder and added, I've already booked the entire restaurant, so no need to be formal tonight, just enjoy yourselves. Chapter 30, New Year's Celebration. Due to Ethan Carter's interruption, Lucas King couldn't have the private time he had hoped for with Victoria White. Using the excuse of the production team, Ethan left Lucas King feeling helpless and unable to refuse. After the production team's dinner party, Ethan Carter had a private conversation with Lucas King. Victoria White didn't know what they discussed, but after that, Lucas King clearly became more distant from her, which was exactly what she wanted. The next day, the show officially began filming. Sophia Collins' ankle had mostly recovered, and the tasks in Santorini weren't very demanding. With Nathan Taylor's help, Sophia managed to keep up with the program's pace and even secured second place overall. The filming for this episode took place at the end of December, as the new year approached. The 8 stars were busy with their work commitments. Some, along with a few staff members, returned home early, while Victoria White decided to stay in Santorini for an extra day and chose to take a later flight. On her last day in Santorini, Victoria White signed up for a volcano tour. After having breakfast at the hotel, she and Chloe Young took a car to the port, boarded a boat to explore the volcano, and returned to Santorini in the afternoon. On the way back to the hotel, Victoria White discovered a white bookstore hidden among clusters of flowers. Its name was Oasis Books. Written on the bookstore's exterior wall was a brief biography of the owner in English. Victoria read it with interest, and under the Favorite Authors section, the first name listed by the owner was Cassel. Chloe Young, what a coincidence. The owner of this bookstore also loves Cassel's books. Noticing the familiar author's name, Victoria White became a bit excited and pulled Chloe Young into the bookstore. Let's go in and take a look. All right. Chloe Young glanced around, ensuring nothing seemed out of the ordinary before following Victoria White into the store. Hello, ladies. Is there anything I can assist you with? As Victoria White stepped into the Mediterranean-style bookstore, a female staff member behind the cashier greeted them in English. Hi. I noticed outside that the owner is a fan of Cassel, and so am I, so I thought I'd come in and check it out, Victoria White replied to the staff member. That's right, our boss is indeed a fan of Cassel. He's currently chatting with another customer, the staff member said with a smile. Feel free to browse around, he should be out shortly. Thank you. Victoria White thanked the staff member and followed the directions on the shelves to the novel section. She found a dedicated area showcasing Cassel's books. As she carefully examined the books, she noticed a Greek edition she didn't yet own. Initially, Victoria White only spotted that one book, but as she pulled it out, she discovered many more Cassel books hidden behind the shelf, ones she had never seen before. Unable to handle them all by herself, she called out for help, Chloe Young, where are you? I need an extra hand here. What's up? Chloe Young walked over to Victoria White and bent down to see her crouched by the shelf, pulling out books. I found an entire collection of Cassel's books that I haven't collected yet, Victoria White said, pulling out nearly 10 books from behind the shelf and handing half of them to Chloe Young. I want to buy all of these. Can you help me carry them? No problem. Chloe Young, being quite strong, easily carried the stack of books Victoria handed her and brought them to the cashier without any difficulty. Hello, I'd like to purchase all of these books, Victoria White said to the staff member as she took out her wallet to pay. This collection is unique, and I'm not sure if the owner is willing to sell it. Please wait a moment, the staff member said, picking up a walkie-talkie and speaking in a language Victoria White didn't understand. Shortly after, a tall man appeared at the staircase in the store, followed by someone Victoria White was very familiar with. Mrs. White. The man behind called Victoria White, and as she turned around, she realized it was Ethan Carter. Director Carter, why are you here? Victoria White froze upon seeing him. The owner of this shop is a college friend of mine. I came to visit him, Ethan Carter explained. This is the owner, Jeremy. Jeremy, this is my colleague, Mrs. White. Hello, Mrs. White, Jeremy greeted in perfect American English. Nice to meet you. Richie just mentioned you to me earlier. Hello, Victoria White nodded at Jeremy, then glanced at Ethan Carter. Your English name is Richie. It's a French name, Ethan Carter corrected. My staff told me they met a loyal fan of Cassel. I was planning to introduce Cassel to you, but it seems you already know each other, Jeremy laughed, revealing his perfectly white teeth. I'm hosting a New Year's Eve party at the bookstore tonight. Mrs. White, you should join us. What happens at a New Year's Eve party? Victoria White asked curiously. It's just a gathering where we chat, have some drinks, and enjoy the sunset, Jeremy explained. The second floor of my bookstore has a large terrace, perfect for watching the sunset. Victoria White remembered she had planned to watch the sunset with Lucas King that day, but Ethan Carter had interrupted. She really wanted to see the legendary Santorini sunset. How beautiful is the sunset, she wondered. All right, I'll join. Richie, take Mrs. White upstairs first. I'll grab a few things and be right back, Jeremy patted Ethan Carter on the shoulder, instructing him to lead Victoria White and the others upstairs, while he headed to the bookstore's basement. Sis Victoria. Emily Carter, who was playing with toys on a rug in the corner of the terrace, immediately stood up and ran over to Victoria White with a beaming smile. You came to Uncle Jeremy's shop too? That's right, Victoria White replied with a smile, patting Emily Carter's head. I have to tell you, the sunset here is absolutely stunning. Emily Carter chattered excitedly to Victoria White. Meanwhile, Ethan Carter whispered a few words to Chloe Young, who nodded in understanding. Emily Carter, don't cling to Mrs. White for too long. Why don't we go sit over there? After finishing his conversation with Chloe Young, Ethan Carter approached to pick up Emily Carter, but the little girl refused. I don't want to sit there. I want to keep playing. Emily Carter protested, twisting and turning, determined not to sit still. Emily Carter, let me play with you, Chloe Young offered, picking up a small doll from the toys on the rug to amuse the little girl. Okay. Emily Carter nodded in agreement, and soon Chloe Young was playing with her on the rug. Mrs. White, let's sit over there. The view is better, Ethan Carter pointed to the table and chairs near the railing, then walked over to pull out a chair for Victoria White. Thank you, Victoria White said as she sat down at the table. Ethan Carter took a seat beside her. Mrs. White, this is homemade wine. Please have a taste. Jeremy went down to the cellar to grab a bottle of wine and brought along 2 tall-stemmed glasses, placing everything on the table. Victoria White and Ethan Carter sipped their wine while waiting for the sunset. At 5 in the afternoon, the warm winter sunlight began to fade. The Aegean Sea shimmered with a silvery glow, the evening light casting its hues over the water. White sailboats glided over the waves, their shadows reflected on the surface, while the pristine white of Santorini bathed in a warm golden hue, breathtakingly beautiful. It's so beautiful, Victoria White rested her chin on her hand, gazing at the mesmerizing sunset that shifted into countless forms before her eyes, unable to hold back her admiration. Actually, Ethan Carter unconsciously leaned closer to Victoria White, about to say something when she turned to look at him, realizing how close they were. Victoria White subtly moved back, creating some distance between them. What were you going to say? Nothing, Ethan Carter replied with a slightly awkward smile, a hint of disappointment flickering in his eyes. Chapter 31, Opening Weibo. The filming in Europe for the program team of Speeding Star has been completed. After returning to her home country, Victoria White rested for a day. Then, on the day before New Year's Eve, she attended an internal meeting organized by the Speeding Star team to discuss upcoming work. Lastly, regarding the unexpected injury of a guest, although the guest herself didn't take it seriously, we still need to thoroughly review whether our preparations were adequate, Sandra Lane, who was chairing the meeting, said with a serious expression when mentioning Sophia Collins' injury. Moving forward, during the filming in the US and domestically, we must rigorously ensure the safety of all tasks to prevent such incidents from happening again. Yes, the staff member in charge of task design nodded repeatedly, taking Sandra Lane's words to heart. If there are no other issues, let's adjourn, Sandra Lane announced, though she didn't close her work notebook. Victoria, please stay back for a moment. Sure, Victoria White responded. She waited until everyone else had left before sitting down in the seat closest to Sandra Lane. Director Lane, is there something you'd like to discuss with me? Victoria, our program is scheduled to air in mid-February, and promotional activities will begin in January, Sandra Lane said, circling the word promotion in her notebook. All 8 celebrity guests already have verified Weibo accounts. Mr. Cassel has also opened a Weibo account, and during the filming process, they posted quite a bit to promote the show. But up until now, you still haven't created one. I'm not very familiar with these social media platforms, so I haven't opened an account, Victoria White explained, pressing her lips together with a hint of helplessness. I understand your habits. Previously, the program Linares Weekend Stars always relied on the show's official Weibo account to make announcements. But this time, since it's a reality show and you're part of it, I hope you can be more flexible, Sandra Lane said sincerely as she closed her work notebook. After all, having a verified Weibo account is essential. If you really don't want to manage it yourself, Chloe Young can handle it for you. Well, alright, Victoria White thought for a moment before agreeing to Sandra Lane's request. But occasionally, it's okay if I log in to check, right? As long as you don't post anything inappropriate, just browsing is perfectly fine, Sandra Lane said as she stood up and walked Victoria White out of the meeting room. I'll have Chloe Young set up a verified Weibo account for you and give you the login credentials. You can check it whenever you have time. Alright. Victoria White returned to the office and spent the entire afternoon preparing for the next issue of Linares Weekend Star. At the same time, Chloe Young assisted her in setting up a Weibo account. Near the end of the workday, Chloe Young took Victoria White's phone, installed the Weibo app, and handed it back to her with the account credentials, instructing her to log in. Victoria White entered the account details and successfully logged in. Under Chloe Young's guidance, she familiarized herself with the platform's features and tried searching for the account, Fishing Memories, actively choosing to follow Vivian Moore. After following Vivian Moore, Victoria White casually checked her following list and noticed that all the accounts she followed were guests from Celebrity Speed Race. What surprised her was that Ethan Carter had 2 accounts, one named Author Cassel and the other Ethan Carter. Upon clicking into them, she found that the content of the 2 accounts was entirely different. The Ethan Carter account shared updates related to Pinnacle Entertainment, while the Author Cassel account focused solely on new books and Celebrity Speed Race. As Victoria White browsed through the Author Cassel account, she discovered it was created less than a month ago but already had over 100,000 followers. Many fans were confessing their love for Cassel, with some comments being surprisingly bold. Chloe Young, is this Cassel account really managed by CEO Carter? After reading a few standout comments, including one that said, Cassel, I want to have your baby, Victoria White felt slightly uncomfortable and asked Chloe Young. From what I know, this account is personally managed by CEO Carter, while the Ethan Carter account is handled by Pinnacle Entertainment's team, Chloe Young replied before suggesting, Miss White, why don't you post something on Weibo to greet everyone? What should I say? Victoria White thought for a moment but couldn't decide on what to write. Suddenly, her Weibo app chimed with a notification. She opened it and saw that Vivian Moore had followed her. My dear friend Victoria White has finally joined Weibo. Welcome, darling Victoria White, Vivian Moore posted shortly after, along with a photo of the two of them at Timeless Coffee. Feeling touched by her best friend's warm welcome, Victoria White shared the post and added a short message, "Thank you so much." Sharing Vivian's post should be enough, right? No need to post anything else, Victoria White thought. However, just a few minutes later, her phone chimed again. She picked it up and saw that author Cassel had mentioned her in a post. On behalf of Sisai, welcome to Weibo, Victoria White, the post read. It was simple, but the attached photo caught her attention. It was taken at Irina's house, showing the moment when Sisai had secretly kissed Victoria White. This was the first time Victoria had seen this picture. In the photo, she was smiling directly at the camera, while Sisai was kissing her cheek. The entire image looked stunning. Mrs. White, when did you take this photo? Chloe Young scrolled through Weibo and was surprised to see the picture. I've never seen this photo before. This is my first time seeing it too. Victoria White pressed her lips together, unsure of Ethan Carter's intentions. Should I share this post? You just shared Vivian Moore's post, and since you and CEO Carter follow each other, it might seem a bit impolite not to share it, right? Chloe Young hesitated, holding her phone. Let me think about it. Just as Victoria White was still hesitating, she suddenly received a private message from the writer Cassel. Mrs. White, Emily Carter knows you've opened a Weibo account, and she's thrilled. She asked me to make sure to post something, along with a photo of her sneaking a kiss on your cheek, hoping you could share it to make her happy, smiley face. Hearing this from Cassel, Victoria White felt it would be awkward not to share. She reposted it, adding a caption, "Thank you, Emily Carter." Chapter 32, Memories of New York. After returning from Greece, the program team took a few weeks off. 3 weeks later, as usual, Victoria White flew to New York, USA, 2 days ahead of schedule. This time, Andrew Fields did not accompany her, but Ethan Carter and Emily Carter were on the same flight to New York as Victoria White. Victoria, this is my first time in New York. Have you ever been to New York before? Just like the previous trip to France, Emily Carter sat between Victoria White and Ethan Carter, hugging her stuffed bunny, smiling brightly as she asked Victoria. I was born in New York, so yes, I've been there, Victoria White replied softly, helping Emily Carter fix her hair. How long did you live in New York? Emily Carter asked excitedly. Well, I lived in Brooklyn, New York, for 5 years as a child. Later, I spent another 2 years there for graduate school, so I wasn't there for very long, Victoria White thought for a moment before answering. But if you want to explore, I can take you around the city. Alright, it's a deal. Emily Carter and Victoria White hooked their pinky fingers together, sealing their promise. After having lunch on the plane, once Emily Carter had fallen asleep, Ethan Carter pulled out his laptop to work on a manuscript. Victoria White, curious, tried to sneak a peek at his screen. When he caught her, she quickly changed the subject, saying, "Last time, you mentioned writing an advertisement for the Kai Dike Hotel. What's your excuse for traveling early this time?" The special collector's edition of Inspector Lake is about to be released in the US, and I want to join Elena's interview program to promote the book, Ethan Carter explained. The English rights for Angel's Descent have also been sold, and it should be released simultaneously with the Chinese version. Is it Elena from Elena's show? Victoria White asked curiously. Yes, that's her, Ethan Carter nodded. Elena is a great person, and her show has significant influence. Joining it will definitely benefit you, Victoria White said confidently. You know her. Years ago, when I was performing for SK, she interviewed me a few times. I found her to be very pleasant, Victoria White replied. It seems that I'll have to rely on your guidance when the time comes, as I've never met her before, Ethan Carter replied before refocusing on the book he was writing. So, how much of your book have you written? Victoria White, still unsatisfied with the answer she received, pressed on. That's a secret. Ethan Carter glanced at Victoria White and deliberately said in a mysterious tone, don't even think about prying it out of me. When I feel like sharing, I'll let you know. Humph. Although she knew Ethan Carter was obligated to keep things confidential, Victoria White couldn't help feeling a little annoyed at not getting the answer she wanted. Oh, by the way, Mrs. White, Elena sent me the interview questions yesterday. Could you take a look at them for me? Ethan Carter suddenly remembered, pulling the script from his briefcase and handing it to Victoria White. These questions seemed pretty standard. Victoria White casually skimmed through them and noticed they were mostly about Cassel's new book, with a few personal interest questions sprinkled in. Overall, they seemed ordinary. Or, do you not understand these questions? I don't really get them, Ethan Carter admitted with a slightly awkward smile. My English isn't great, which is why I studied abroad in France. Even Emily Carter was influenced by me, her English isn't very good either. Emily Carter is still young, she can learn over time. But you, well, this is probably as good as it gets, Victoria White teased, feeling a bit pleased to discover that, after months of knowing Ethan Carter, she finally had a skill that surpassed his. Maybe so, but Elena has already arranged for a translator, so doing the interview won't be a problem, Ethan Carter replied, saying no more as he returned to drafting his manuscript. After more than 10 hours of flying, their plane landed at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. The Caddy New York Hotel had sent a car to pick up the three of them and take them to the hotel. According to prior arrangements, Victoria White and Ethan Carter were staying in two adjacent luxury suites. The hotel, located not far from Central Park, offered stunning views of the park and New York's iconic skyline through its floor-to-ceiling windows. Since the Caddy Group's headquarters are based in New York, the advertising photo shoot assignment in the city was handed over to the local Caddy advertising agency. Victoria White had stayed at the Caddy New York Hotel many times before. This time, as soon as she arrived, she quickly unpacked her luggage and immediately got to work. Her ability to adapt this time was noticeably faster compared to her experiences in France and Greece. Victoria White spent a day completing scenes for the commercial script. The next day, she decided to fulfill her promise made on the plane and act as a one-day tour guide in New York for Ethan Carter and Emily Carter. Sister Victoria, where will you take me and Dad to play? Emily Carter, who only needed a day to get over jet lag, was brimming with excitement while enjoying the buffet breakfast at the Caddy Hotel. We need to discuss this for a bit first. Victoria White, scrolling through her phone to check famous tourist spots in New York, gently patted Emily Carter's head, trying to calm her down. Mrs. White, could you help me with something? Ethan Carter returned to the table carrying 2 trays of food, accompanied by a waiter. Could you ask the server if they have cherries? Hello, may I ask if cherries are available here? Victoria White asked the waiter in English. Sorry, it's not cherry season in the US right now, the waiter replied with a professional smile, explaining to Victoria White. If you'd like, we can source cherries from South America. Thank you, Victoria White expressed her gratitude before turning to Ethan Carter and speaking in Mandarin. He said it's not cherry season, but if you want, they can buy cherries from South America. No need, I can purchase them myself. Ethan Carter smiled at the waiter, thanked him in English, and waited for the server to leave before sitting down. Mr. Carter, I just looked up a one-day travel guide for New York. Tourists usually choose to visit Times Square, Wall Street, and the Statue of Liberty. If there's time, they might also go to Broadway for a musical. Victoria White began introducing New York attractions after Ethan Carter sat down. If we drive ourselves, we can cover all these spots in one day. Mrs. White, I'm not very interested in those famous tourist spots, and Emily and I don't really understand opera, Ethan Carter responded indifferently, shifting the conversation to Victoria White. If you had one day, where would you go? I'd probably spend the entire day in Central Park, Victoria White thought for a moment before replying. I'd stroll through the park, dine at a lakeside restaurant with a view, and even go boating after lunch. Boating? Emily Carter repeated Victoria White's words, her excitement reigniting. I want to go boating. All right, then today we'll go to Central Park, Ethan Carter coaxed Emily Carter and then turned to Victoria White. All right, I'll make a lunch reservation now, Victoria White said, searching for the phone number of the Boathouse restaurant and booking a table for 2 adults and 1 child.